Prologue. Pure malice. The cryptids are a group of individuals with a myriad of different characteristics. Most of them have no sense of cooperation and simply rampage as they please. However, there are also groups that share the same characteristics. They are highly intelligent and protect their allies, and can even form groups to fight against beings of a higher rank by joining forces. This is proof that the cryptids, who fight day and night without fear of even death, and driven by their fighting instinct, also have a certain intelligence. Therefore, it was inevitable that the insector race would derive from the cryptids. And now, Q-fu-fu-fu-fu. Ivirage, the destruction dragon, let out a cry of evolution. It was a new birth. As the rainbow-colored cocoon enveloped Ivirage, its body was reconstructed. Inside, spiritual life forms can freely change their appearance and size, but Ivirage, being without will, was formless. As energy accumulated, it grew larger, becoming sinister and evil, a figure that inspires fear and terror. But as Ivirage evolved, it underwent a major change. Its size shrunk, becoming the size of a human child. The enormous amount of energy condensed into it made its presence so striking that it was almost hopeless. The rainbow-colored remains of the cocoon enveloped its precious/beautiful body, jade body. The skin peeking through the gaps was pure white and fresh. Its pure white hair, which seemed to swallow up the light, was fluffy like a dandelion. Its cherry-colored lips were cute, yet twisted with wickedness. Its golden eyes were filled with the light of intelligence. By gaining the emotion of hatred, Ivirage's sensibilities blossomed as an incarnation of malice. With a clear will, Ivirage wanted to show off its existence to the world at large. But before that, Ivirage remembered. The emotional gain has also rapidly developed her intellect. Thanks to this, she understood that she had been cast out. Lonely. Frustrating. Unforgivable. There was once a time when she was a perfect, flawless all-one. She was fulfilled, lacking intellect, sensitivity, or even emotion. Ivirage felt no anxiety, dissatisfaction, or even boredom. And yet, half of her body was missing. The dreamlike sense of omnipotence vanished, and she was exposed to an uncertain reality. Still, since Ivirage had no intellect, she never felt dissatisfied, but the sense of loss that suddenly came and went, loneliness, was something she could not counter. No matter what she did, but now it was different. Ivirage also gained an ego. She gained intelligence and came to know her situation, and gained emotions, vowing revenge. If she had lost something, she could just take it back. If she swallowed the entire world, what is lost should be returned. She'll destroy what Veldanava had created. That was the means to achieve Ivirage's goal. Because of the hatred that was the first emotion she acquired, Ivirage became jealous of all living things. As such, she has no doubts and no hesitation in her intention to destroy the world. And then, in front of the awakened evil god, there was a door, a gate leading to another realm. Heavenly Star Palace. Beyond this must lie an unknown world. There are many worlds created by Veldanava. If we crush and swallow them one by one, Ivirage thought, I am sure I will be satisfied one day. Ivirage thinks so and takes pleasure in dreaming of that time, imagining it. Kyaha. When Ivirage laughed, there were those who responded. They were the kings who ruled the flock. Beasts that galloped through nothingness. Birds that flew through dimensions. Fish that swam between the stars. 3 servants who loved the dreaming chaos, Dragon Ivirage as their mother. The rulers of the cryptids, whose talents alone could rival even the former king of the insect demons, Xeranus, had been blessed by the evolution of the destruction dragon Ivirage. Their rampant violence, which had been powerful even in the past, had become uncontrollable by gaining a sense of self. This has had an unimaginable impact on all derived races. Kyaha, my adorable servants, this is what cuteness feels like. Watashi no kawaii shimob takai. This is what kawaii is all about. Ibarage was overjoyed with this emotion she was experiencing for the first time, and became even more cheerful, propelling emotion even further. So, carried away by that momentum, she decided to give her beloved servants a gift of this delightful feeling. Well, 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 that's it. I'll give you all names. Mommy'll give you wonderful, wonderful names. The name was the first gift Ibarage ever received. She had never thought of it that way, but now that she has gained a sense of self, she understands how happy it made her, experiencing the emotion of joy for the first time. Ibarage innocently embodied joy. However, Ibarage is too ignorant of being the very embodiment of malice, so even naming something has a different meaning than usual. Let's see, your Kakashi, Ibarage said, turning her eyes to the beast sprinting through the void. The beast, named Kakashi, possessed not only animalistic instincts, but also strong emotions. It inherited the malevolent intent that Ibarage harbored, along with its name. Ibarage named the other two beasts in the same way. The bird that flies through the dimensions was given the name Habataki, along with the resentment she carried. The fish that swims between the stars was given the name Swim, inheriting the hatred she carried. They were cute names, but the malice was undoubtedly transmitted. The three servants, Shimob, would have done anything for their mother, but this naming only strengthened that tendency. In order to fulfill their mother's wish, they will not hesitate to even destroy themselves. The evolution of the three servants is complete. Their appearance is sinister and vicious. Kakashi has the body of a giant lion with the head of a dragon, covered entirely in dragon scales. Its tail, like a viper's, is divided into 8 sections and wriggles freely. Eyeballs cover its body, so there are no blind spots. A viscous degradative mucus seeps from small protrusions and turns into mist, and even demons of the Demon Lord class would not be able to escape death if it were to come into contact with Kakashi's aura, mist. Habataki is two-headed and hermaphroditic. It is an elegant demonic bird with an eagle-like figure and a peacock's tail. Its entire body is covered in feathers of the ultimate metal, hihiricane, shining in a golden color. Its appearance is somewhat inorganic and mechanical rather than biological. If you look closely, even its feathers are made of metal. Swim is the most bizarre of the bunch, and yet it is a fish monster with a mysterious beauty. It has a squid-like shape with a pointed tip. It has no head, and numerous tentacles grow from a round torso located in the center of its body. Upon closer inspection, it can be seen that its tentacles are made up of tiny, interconnected joints, allowing them to move with complete freedom. Collection of small, monstrous entities covered in biosteel, aerionium, are parasitizing Swim. They are all unique and have no similar parts, but what they have in common is their otherworldliness. It is impossible for them to exist as living creatures, and the lack of any regularity is what makes them unique. The same can be said for their subordinates. The higher the cryptids that belong to each servant, the more they inherit the characteristics of their parents. They inherited more ferocious and terrifying powers than those that are naturally generated from magical energy. The same can be said for the influence of evolution and naming this time. Countless fantasy creatures stained with malice had undergone immeasurable and evil evolution. In the case of the veteran higher-ups, they possess a ferocious and unparalleled power that surpasses even the disaster class at the very least. Their number easily exceeds 100, and when it comes to the lower ranks that branch out from them, the scale reaches tens of thousands. The horde of cryptids, centered around the world destruction dragon, Ibarage, was the very army of the evil god that heralded the end of the world. Fun, it's so much fun. Now let's go play, Ibarage ordered. She had a smile on his face, but her eyes were not smiling. She fixed her gaze firmly on the heavenly stair palace and began to move without a sound. Harboring hatred in her eyes for those who left her behind, Ivragay descended to the heavenly star palace, vowing to take back everything she had lost. Normally, the gate connecting to the base world was completely closed, and no one could pass through without a key. But now, for some reason, the gate was open. Dagrul, the gatekeeper, was also absent, and anyone could pass through. On top of that, a tremendous impact, strong enough to reach the heavenly star palace, had passed through the gate and been delivered from the ground, passing through the heavenly tower beyond. This was the effect of Milim's dragon nova. The interior of the heavenly tower was now in a state of catastrophic destruction. Each floor had an open ceiling, allowing the cryptid's army to pass through without any hindrance. Kayaha, how exciting. No one could impede Ivalaj's steps. Accompanied by the army of hell, the innocent evil god strode forward, and as soon as she crossed over into the world, found them. Ivalaj discovered the fragments scattered throughout the prime world. It is the presence of those who were once related to the Star King Dragon Veldanava. Ivalaj sneered. Filled with hatred for those Veldanava loved, she swore to destroy the world. The evil god's army responded to Ivalaj in order to overrun the earth, to swallow everything and return to being the whole one once again. Chapter 1. Lord of Vice. Let's rewind time to before the battle in the labyrinth began. As soon as the policy was decided, at a meeting of the executives of Demon Country, Tempest, Tensura quickly took action. Leaving the control room, she immediately sent a thought transmission to Shen, who she had left behind in the kingdom of Ingracia. After briefly conveying the contents of the meeting, she ordered him to consult with Hinata and decide the rest. Next, as she was about to contact Moss, she was greeted by Sauka, who had a stern expression. "Oh, I will guide you. Is it all right for you not to assist Lord Saoi?" "Yes, my subordinates have already been dispatched to various locations," Sauka said, nodding slightly. That was the truth. Hokyusu was in the holy empire of Lubelius. Seika was in the holy void of Damargania. In the sorcerer dynasty of Sarian, there was Nanso. They had scattered to their respective battlefields to become Lord Saoi's cloned bodies, limbs, and quickly gather information. And in the place they are heading to now, Tauka was in charge of the mission, but contact has been lost. Judging from the situation, she had been trapped in the icy world created by Velzard. If her subordinate Tauka had been turned into an ice statue, it is only natural for Sauka to participate in this rescue operation. I see. Even without a full explanation, Tensura understood the situation. Led by Sauka, the two marched on to a secluded room dedicated to teleportation. To prevent enemy infiltration, teleportation directly from within the labyrinth to the outside was forbidden. For those who can freely use spatial teleportation, it is a pain, but everyone follows this rule to comply with the safety-first policy. While walking, Tensura thought. Frankly speaking, even with Sauka's skill, she will only be a hindrance when facing Velzard. Understanding this, Tensura accepted Sauka's offer. Not only is fighting power necessary in battle, but analytical and information transmission abilities are also important. If Sauka could relay information to the control room, Tensura would not be bothered with miscellaneous tasks. It's not necessary, but she judged that it would be helpful to have. Moreover, she can understand Sauka's feelings of wanting to help her subordinates who are caught up in this. Since Tensura's purpose is also to rescue Karara and the others, cooperating with Sauka here, rather than refusing her help, will increase the probability of success of the operation. However, if she takes her along as she is, Sauka would only die in vain. This is because Guy and Velzard had returned once again, was at it once again. If she is exposed to Velzard's aura, who has become serious, she will probably die instantly before becoming an ice statue. I don't know what Lady Velzard is thinking, but I wonder if she is seriously fighting with Guy. If so, I don't think I can withstand her. Currently, the battlefield of old Euryzania was sealed in a world of ice, but that in itself is a mystery. If Velzard had wanted to, she could have easily turned all living things into ice dust instead of turning them into ice statues. If that had happened, with the exception of demons and other exceptions capable of resurrection, there should have been 0 survivors. In other words, it was precisely because they had become ice statues that possibility of survival remained. That's right. Lady Velzard is a merciless person, but she doesn't do meaningless things. She didn't intend to kill. It's reasonable to think so. If that's the case, what exactly is Velzard's purpose? Tensura was convinced that it was unlikely that she was being controlled by Feldway. It would be difficult even to manipulate the primordials like themselves, let alone control dragon kind, who reigns at the pinnacle of spiritual life in perfect condition. From Tensura's point of view, it was an impossible idea. There were examples, so the possibility was not 0, but it was more convincing to conclude that it was all Velzard's will. The most likely reason was that she was holding Guy back at Feldway's request. Since she has sensed that there seemed to be a connection between them, it was natural to think that their interests coincided. However, Tensura suspected that there was more to it than that. Could Lord Rimuru have foreseen a perfect answer? No, it's no good to rely on him like this. Every time, I will do what I can in my own way. If there was an answer, there is no point in worrying, but if not, it's just a waste of time to think about it. It would be best if she could read Velzard's intentions, but even Tensura could not perfectly see through the heart of a dragon kind. In any case, it is certain that it is better not to have unnecessary casualties. If so, they should take on the mission, using all the safety measures they can take. Moss, come here. Understood. After calling out to her confidant Moss, Tensura stopped and called out to Sauka. Then she looked directly at her and tried to gauge Sauka's resolve. You intend to come with me, don't you? Yes, my mission is to investigate the local situation. If possible, rescue anyone who needs to be rescued. Wait, because that's impossible. It seems you don't understand, so I'll explain. Velzard Sama's ice and snow freezes everything, halting all activity. Yes, even life, vital activity. Then, is it already too late? No, it's not. Tensura told Sauka to calm down, restraining her. Then she explained the current situation in a way that Sauka could understand. It's just stopped, so it can be resumed. In other words, that wasn't an attack, rather. Yes, that ice and snow was more like a protective curtain protecting that land. In ancient times, Tensura had witnessed Velzard fighting Guy. I was peeking at the scene on the ground from the demon world, and the battle was nothing short of spectacular. Velzard's atmospheric prison wall, which solidified the atmosphere, easily blocked Guy's attack. However, in the next moment, it was just as easily shattered by a barrage of magic. Such a scene repeated itself. The exchange of superb techniques showed that both were in a class of their own. Back then, she hadn't even been able to find either of their weaknesses, but now Tensura could at least understand what properties their techniques contained. Velzard's ice and snow stopped everything in place. Probably with the same principle as the defensive technique, atmospheric prison wall, she is prolonging the effect time by freezing it. Even if you capture the opponent with a normal atmospheric prison wall, it will be released in a short period of time, so it is not suitable for sealing. However, in the current state combined with freezing, it should be possible to seal the movement semi-permanently. It was like an ice prison that took away their consciousness, and considering that even Carrara was unable to escape, its strength and precision had reached a terrifying level. Moreover, it was originally a defensive technique. I think it's to protect them, so that they won't be involved in their battle. It's safe to say that the ice statues are difficult to destroy, Tensura asserted. A little later, a look of understanding finally appeared on Sauka's face. So you're saying that Velzard-sama has no hostile intent? That was a difficult question. After thinking about it for a bit, Tensura answered. Rather than being hostile, Velzard-sama must have some sort of plan. She probably used such a method because she doesn't want it to be disturbed. She is not controlled by Feldway, they just have a common interest, and Velzard must have created a situation that was convenient for her to achieve that goal. Tensura explained this speculation to her. Then, is the rescue operation itself unnecessary? Yes, that's right. Or rather, it's probably impossible to move them. Seeing Sauka's bewildered look, Tensura added to her explanation. It's not just living things that were frozen by the snow and ice. The ground itself, a part of the planet's surface, is protected from being destroyed by Velzard-sama's attacks. I see. Sauka finally understood. No, that's not right. She understood, but the scale was so different that it didn't really feel real. Even so, she grasped the situation, so she understood what Tensura was trying to say. It's hard to believe that everyone was turned into ice statues as a measure to protect the planet. But if that's true, then there seems to be no need to transport the ice statues to a safe place. That's why Sauka understood. It's not that it's not necessary, but that it can't be moved. If everything is fixed in place, then the ice statues must also be integrated, making it impossible to move them from their places. Tensura's words pointed to that. It seems you understand. Then I'll ask you one more time. Do you still intend to come along? If rescue missions are meaningless, all Sauka can do is a reconnaissance mission. And if she has to jump into a hellish place, where the white ice dragon Velzard and the demon king Guy are fighting with all their might, it is inevitable that Sauka's own safety could not be guaranteed. Is it really worth taking such a risk? Yes, Sauka nodded. If it's allowed, I'll go too. Sauka is also a covert operative. As Saui's confidant, she had a duty to convey what was happening on the ground to the center. She would not let others realize it, but Saui was pushing himself too hard. Sauka, who had always followed Saui's footsteps, was aware of this fact. You might die, you know. I'm prepared for it. Sauka answered Tensura's question without hesitation. That determination was beautiful. Tensura smiled with satisfaction. Frankly speaking, there is little you can do on the ground, if it's just about conveying the situation. To the control room, we can do it ourselves. But there's a role that only you can play. What is that? A landmark. A landmark, you say? Yes, that's right. Because of the battle between Velzard-sama and Guy, that area has been transformed into an unobservable danger zone. It's impossible to teleport directly to such a place. And naturally, we have no choice but to jump to a place a little away that isn't affected. Sauka nodded in agreement. However, when she heard Tensura's next words, she understood her intention. But, if there was someone she knew there, she could have jumped to that person. Tensura said. If it were Guy and Velzard, Tensura knew both of them well. It would be possible to use those two as landmarks to perform a space transfer, but in that case, there was a possibility of being caught up in a super attack if they were unlucky. It was unclear what was happening on site, so the situation immediately after the transfer would be left to chance. Even from Tensura's point of view, that is nothing short of a suicidal act. In other words, it was a dangerous act for anyone. In that respect, if there was someone observing the situation on site. I see, just by me being alive, that place is guaranteed to be a safe zone. That's right. Tensura smiled with satisfaction at the perceptive Sauka. That was a gentle smile, but it was very ruthless and cold. Because those words were practically asking Sauka to become a canary in a coal mine. Moreover, it was a job that anyone could do. Anyone would be fine as long as they were alive. Besides, the only thing they could gain by taking that much risk was the short time it would take for reinforcements to arrive. Normally, there was no need to take such a risk. But Sauka had already made up her mind. No problem. If I can be of service, I'll just complete the mission. Sauka declared with a completely clear gaze. As Saue-sama's confidant, I can't be thought of as useless. Including the situation report, I will show you that I can handle it. That resolve was enough to move Tensura's heart. Very well, that's wonderful, Sauka-san. Tensura looked at Sauka in a new light. All of Rimuru-ru's subordinates have strong wills, and Sauka is no exception. Tensura's smile deepened. Then, she commanded, facing the empty space. Moss, make sure you protect Sauka. When Sauka turned her eyes, Moss, who had been summoned, was kneeling there. He respectfully bowed and responded, as you wish. If Moss was there, then surely her role would be unnecessary, Sauka panicked. But neither Tensura nor Moss budged. Of course, and even Moss can erase his presence. It will be difficult for even the executives to find his location, I suppose. Diablo would be able to do it. However, it would be difficult for others, Tensura asserted. Then, she thought that it would be good to make it possible to sense the presence, but when she thought about it carefully, she realized that there were few executives who were on good terms with Moss. Saue also used Moss, but it was only one-way communication from Moss. Benimaru was the same, and only received information from Moss. To begin with, for a demon, a spiritual life form that specializes in secret operations, leaking one's location information is a foolish act. Continuing to show one's presence is like an unbearable torture. He had no choice but to do so if necessary, but in truth, he did not want to do anything that would draw attention in front of Velzard. If I unnaturally make my presence known, I might be thought of as annoying by Lady Velzard, and could be targeted first. Moss whispered in a low voice that only Sauka could hear. I see. Sauka agreed, and decided to accept Moss's protection. Thus, the group headed to the frigid hell of Velzard, where snow and ice rage wildly. The place where they were teleported by Moss's magic was the very edge of the boundary where Velzard's authority reached. Even Moss, a great demon, could not jump into the ice and snow, where even visibility was impossible. However, that was according to plan. From here on out, you have to be prepared to die. Are you really going, if you want to stop now's the time? Moss quietly asked Sauka. Demon Lord Rimuru, who was Moss's ultimate master, had given his subordinates an absolute order. Don't die. It was an impossible task in the current situation. That's what our mission is, though. Tensura thought without getting worked up. To do that, the important thing was to understand the situation perfectly. Both Guy and Velzard were more powerful than Tensura. If she got caught up in the battle between those two, there was a good chance she would die without even understanding anything. From here on, she couldn't do anything carelessly. Tensura and Moss can revive if they die after a while, but Sauka couldn't. For that reason, Tensura sent her consciousness to the white battlefield. A world dyed white. Velzard's snow and ice swallowed everything, painting it all in one color. However, this was to Tensura's advantage. Because she is the primordial white, Blanc the beautiful white queen who is merciless, cold, and ruthless to all enemies. Testarosa's consciousness melted into the white, and she instantly grasped all kinds of information. Information gathering was Moss's specialty, but there was no way that her master, Testarossa, could be inferior. She usually just worked Moss over, but when she wanted to, her abilities alone were enough. Velgrind Sama's power has mitigated the impact on the Earth, and the battlefield is being maintained. Velzard Sama's authority has frozen the surface of the Earth, but this is still. If Guy and Velzard were to clash, the after-effects of that power alone would have an immeasurable impact on the Earth. Even so, the axis of the Earth has not shifted yet because Velgrind is protecting it. Even for someone like Velgrind, it would be difficult to intervene in the battle between the two. Those who can end this battle are no one but themselves. What is of concern here is Velzard's purpose. Not only Carrara and the others, but all of Milim's subordinates have been turned into ice statues. If she intended to kill them, she would not have gone to such troublesome lengths. If it was to protect the planet, it was different from Feldway's intentions. That is why it is difficult to imagine that Velzard is being controlled by Feldway. Vague speculation and assumptions can lead to fatal mistakes. Let's take a closer look at this situation. Testarossa was cautious. Even though she was approaching the core of the matter, she stopped thinking there. Unlike ordinary people, she never acts without certainty. That's Testarossa. In order to make the situation more certain, Testarossa grasps the entire battlefield from a bird's-eye view. The center of her concern is, needless to say, the battle between Guy and Velzard. Battlefield which ordinary people cannot even approach, and where even heroic-class people cannot see the battle scene, Testarossa observed with the ease of sightseeing. Velzard's whole body emitted a pale blue glow, countering Guy's attacks. The protective curtain of beautiful fine ice diamond dust that protected her body drew patterns reminiscent of dragon scales every time it received an impact. It was Velzard's proud ironclad defense, snow crystal shield. I wonder if even Guy can break that defense. No, it seems that he hasn't shown his true power yet. A lot of time has passed since this battle began. Even so, they are still observing the situation, cautious, which suggests that both Guy and Velzard are well acquainted with how to fight as transcendents. However, that is the same for Testarossa, so it was not worth being surprised about. If they cannot find a decisive chance to win, the one who gets impatient will lose. The only way to win is to repeat steady work according to the standard move theory, that the one who completely drains the opponent's energy will win. Considering this information, Guy was at a disadvantage. Velzard was efficiently defending while looking for gaps in Guy's defense. In contrast, Guy seemed to be trying to break the snow crystal shield by repeatedly using unnecessary attacks. It looks like that, but knowing Guy, he probably has some kind of plan. For example, if it's just buying time, it would be the best move. Guy had been thinking about the upcoming battle with Ivragay, so he probably didn't want to tire himself out by fighting Velzard here. If Velzard is focusing on defense, it was understandable that he would take the strategy of suppressing consumption by repeating attacks moderately. But that alone is meaningless. I wonder what he thinks the end game will be. Thinking like that, Testarossa continued to observe. As she got used to seeing the battle, the next thing that caught her eye was Velzard's beauty. While being dyed with anger like a raging sea, her golden eyes are fixed on Guy. Those eyes, which usually looked gentle, now had no trace of that. Only Guy was reflected in her freezing cold eyes. After all, this person is unreadable. If so, it is more certain to directly ask her true feelings. Testarossa had completed her assessment of the situation. The location of Carrara and the others who have been turned into ice statues has already been investigated. While starting to move there to protect Sauka, Testarossa prepares for battle. Moss asked Testarossa. To such Testarossa, Moss asks, some of the testa magnanimity and Moss's reverence was lost in translation. Do you intend to join forces with Lord Guy? Testarossa coldly glanced at Moss, who spoke anxiously. Sorry. Moss panicked, thinking that he had made a mistake, but Testarossa, unlike usual, didn't blame him. The real battle has not yet begun. It's not my turn to step in. You're right. Besides, if Guy gets serious, even if I participate, I'll only be a hindrance. Testarossa was also one of the transcendents, but Guy and Velzard possessed godlike powers on a different level. There was no way Testarossa would ever think of intervening in the battle between those two. Testarossa clarified the reason why she was here. The most important thing was to rescue Carrara and the others. Second, she had to stop Velzard from going on a rampage. It was also important to be ready to accept reinforcements as soon as the intruders into the labyrinth were eliminated and the situation in the home country calmed down. Some of these objectives were already beyond reach. The most important one was the rescue operation. They had to protect everyone who had turned to ice in this land, including Millam's subordinates, and they had concluded that there would be no problem with this. It had been suspicious from the start, but confirmation on the ground had revealed that Velzard had no intention of killing. And since it had also been revealed that it was difficult to interfere with Velzard's powers, they had concluded that the rescue of Carrara and the others could only be postponed. Although their first objective was no longer a reality, Testarossa's second objective was her main focus. RETURNP a GE26, 321. If they could just stop Velzard, the problems in this land would be solved. That was why she tried to read Velzard's objectives, but even Testarossa could not be sure, so Testarossa had no choice but to resort to force. However, it was not the direct use of force that Moss was worried about. Beautiful pure white. This land is dyed in my color. Don't you think it's... At this point, Moss understood exactly what Testarossa was thinking, and his face turned pale, realizing that this was going to be a big deal. Testarossa's unknown power is the nihilistic world, the power to manifest the abyss of hell in this world, or so we might say. It was an authority to construct a world unique to Testarossa, capable of annihilating all life. Naturally, it was not omnipotent, but rather an inconvenient power that required various conditions. If the area where the white pure world, nihilistic world, was constructed is filled with positive energy, life force, it will interfere with the manifested negative energy, void, canceling out and causing annihilation. Therefore, if the power is expanded to a wide area, a massacre of all living things will occur. Fortunately, the total amount of void energy that can be summoned is proportional to Testarossa's ability. This means that the range of the white pure world, nihilistic world, is naturally limited. However, this was only possible if the prerequisite was met, that is, unless Testarossa let go of control over void, and allowed it to overflow endlessly and go out of control. RETURNP a GE27 321, Testarossa was feared precisely because she had the potential to destroy the world. However, it is difficult to effectively use white pure world, nihilistic world, in battles against strong opponents. As mentioned above, void is automatically counterbalanced by the living, so if you don't thin out some of the living beforehand, the effective range will be narrowed. If you deploy it on a strong target, you must be careful not to involve unnecessary beings. Since it is an authority that makes it impossible to distinguish between friend and foe, the reality is that there are almost no situations in which it can be used. Although it is incomparably powerful, there are few places to use it. Even Testarossa, who is highly intelligent, was not able to use this authority to its full potential. However, now Testarossa had obtained the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of the Dead Belial. With this, she was able to perfectly control this extremely dangerous authority. This synergistic effect was so unimaginable that it gave Testarossa an absolute advantage that made those who opposed her feel pitiful. Only Moss, who was the viceroy of the White Forces, was well aware of the horror of that power. In hell, life cannot survive. Even souls are annihilated and transformed into energy, a true nothingness. Only higher spiritual life forms can endure this hell. And the abyss of hell was a region where even such high-ranking beings could not survive. Testaross's white pure world nihilistic world can summon that abyss into the present world. Incidentally, Ultima's speciality, dark magic, nihilistic vanish, is a magic that imitates the mechanism of the abyss of hell. Since it is deployed to cover not only a wide area but the entire region, it can be understood how dangerous this is. In the unlikely event that Testarossa fails to control it, the void will overflow endlessly, and the world will be swallowed by the ever-expanding abyss and collapse. Moss knew that. RETURNP a GE 28-321, with just Testarossa's will, death will come that is not even allowed to resist. The speed at which the white space expands exceeds even the speed of light. He must escape immediately, before Testarossa releases her power. If he gets caught up in it, Moss will die instantly. It's not just a matter of protecting Sauka, he will have to give up his own life. Moreover, it seems that even revival may be impossible. He has never tried it, and has no desire to, so the truth remains a mystery. But for Moss, it doesn't really matter. He doesn't mind not knowing until the very end of his seemingly eternal life. Thinking this, he was about to act quickly, but then, Moss suddenly reconsidered that it might not be the case. Testarossa's white pure world, nihilistic world, is terrifying, but it is not invincible. Not only is it difficult to prepare the conditions, and even if it is activated, it is not enough to defeat an overwhelmingly superior opponent. If it were against people of the same rank as Testarossa, such as Carrara or Ultima, the outcome would be decided without any problems. However, if the opponent is a dragon kind, it should be difficult to eliminate that enormous amount of energy. Moreover, Guy is also in this land. As the strongest of the 7 pillars of the beginning, Guy is undoubtedly stronger than Testarossa. If it was only Lord Guy, she might be able to defeat him. But, with Guy and Velzard there, it was unknown how far the effect of the nihilistic world would extend. Testarossa is not the type to take risks. She is an intelligent and cautious person who can determine the trend of the battle and appropriately find the optimal solution. RETURNP a GE 29-321, the reason why Testarossa unleashed her power here and now was, the only ones here are Guy-sama and Velzard-sama, right? No, is that really the case? At this point, Moss finally realized that his premise was wrong. Just like Testarossa, Moss was also gathering information. He released his own clone and investigated this place. He shared that information with Testarossa and found nothing unnatural. That was supposed to be the case, but there was a possibility that he had overlooked something. Due to its nature, the nihilistic world does not miss those who lurk hidden within the scope of the authority. No matter what concealment effect it is, the void does not miss it. What if Testarossa was aiming for that? Does that mean there is someone else here? No way, Moss was shocked. But if the supreme Testarossa whom Moss feared and respected had found that possibility, that was the truth. The outcome was always in Testarossa's hands. I'll be on high alert. Do so. Don't like incompetent subordinates, Testarossa told Moss. It was her own kindness and proof that she acknowledges Moss. After all, if he was truly incompetent, he would not even be able to stand before Testarossa. RETURNP a GE 30-321, his existence would be erased before she even spoke to him. As the viceroy, Moss was well aware of that. And he had continued to choose the correct answer with over 90% accuracy, protecting his current position. He had made it through this time, too. Hearing the satisfied tone in Testarossa's voice, Moss felt a great sense of relief. Then the world was painted even whiter. Asterisk, you do something quite reckless, Testarossa. While saying as expected, a beautiful woman with blue hair stood beside Testarossa. It was Velgrind. She appeared before Testarossa with the separate body she had left behind here. It's not that bad. I was suspicious of whether this series of disturbances was truly Lady Velzard's will, so I just decided to check just in case. The sake of just that purpose, you use a power that could destroy the world. I think it's impressive. Beautiful women stand side by side, conversing with smiles on their faces. It is a spectacle that would be a feast for the eyes if seen by someone who knows nothing about it. However, for Moss, who had been exposed to the white pure world nihilistic world, it was nothing but a terrifying experience. Please, have mercy. I'm still the Grand Duke of Hell, you know. Even though I'm a powerful person second only to the primordials, why am I always treated like this? How refreshing it would be to be able to complain like that. RETURNP a GE31 321, the moment he did something like that, Moss's fate would be sealed. But even so, he should be allowed to grumble in his heart. Thinking this, Moss endured his bitter sadness. Thank you for protecting me. Sauka, who had entered Moss's barrier with him, said this apologetically. It seemed that she hadn't been able to keep up with the rapidly changing situation since coming to this place. Moss thought that it was inevitable. This place, filled with Velzard's magical power, was white out due to a fierce snowstorm containing dense magical power. A normal person would die instantly. Even an A-rank adventurer would be in danger of dying if they stayed there for a few hours. In addition, in this blizzard, visibility was zero, and even sound was obscured. Not only that, Sauka's magic sense was useless, and it was impossible for her to grasp the situation. I wonder if Sauka even noticed Tensura, who was near Moss, and Velgrind, who had appeared. Worry about it. Your goal is to survive here. I'm frustrated because I realized how useless I am. It'll be fine. I mean, I'm the same. Moss and Sauka have different levels of strength. Their ranks are as far apart as those of an adult and a baby. RETURNP a GE32 321. And yet, just like Sauka, Moss was in a situation where he couldn't do anything. This was not a matter of feeling humiliated or anything like that, but merely reaffirming the vast difference in power between Moss and his master. You understand. Right now, our reason for existence is in Tensura's hands. In this white world, our lives will be over with just her will, swallowed by the void where even reincarnation is not possible. Is the true nature of the nihilistic world, but we are only in the first stage now. Until Tensura releases the void, we can still live. First stage is waiting to attack, and the second stage is starting the attack, but it is difficult to keep the raging power in check, so Moss doesn't even know how long this state will last. For him, the reins of his life are in Tensura's hands. Sauka understood that there was nothing he could do, and there would be no point in explaining in detail, so his explanation was half-hearted. Sauka's existence was meaningful just by being here. Any unnecessary burdens would be left for Moss to carry. Sauka was confused. What she wanted to ask was why she was using such a dangerous technique, but all Moss had given her was an explanation of the technique. Even if she understood better, her sense of fear would only increase, so that explanation was unnecessary, Sauka thought. There was one thing that she was glad to know. That is, Moss seems to be unable to do anything, just like herself, and she also understood a lot. The reason she was here was truly important. RETURNP a GE33 321. It was because they were people who were good at gathering information, such as Tensura and Moss, that she did not waver. In this white world where visibility is uncertain, it will take a considerable amount of time for reinforcements to arrive after they are dispatched. If things went wrong, they might even get lost and not be able to reach their destination. There is no guarantee that even executive-level personnel will be able to make it this far. However, if Sauka is here, the story will be different. Using Sauka as a landmark, direct teleportation will be possible. As Moss said, Sauka can achieve her goal just by being alive. Sauka realized that there was no need to belittle herself. All that was left to do was to wait obediently here. In a corner of the white world, Moss and Sauka huddled together like clams. Without paying any attention to the two of them, the conversation between Tensura and Velgrind continued. So, was there any third-party intervention? Is that what you wanted to ask, that you even took the trouble to show yourself by dividing your power? That's right. Honestly speaking, there is little I can do in this land. Milim, who went to the holy void Damargania, released a dragon nova inside the heavenly passage tower. I reinforced it with the Star Guardian barrier, so no major damage was done, but this does not mean that the crisis has passed. I want to save some strength. Velgrind gave a brief explanation of the battle situation in Damargania. The great gate of the heavenly tower, which connects the heavens and the earth, had opened, and Ivrigay's great advance would soon begin. But that's not all. Threats are occurring all over the world. Milim went to Sarian. Her target is probably the divine tree, but there is no way to stop it. We have no choice but to leave it to the local forces. RETURNP a GE34 321. Did Feldway also go to Sarian? Yes, that's right. I see, the situation seems dire. Exactly. We're in trouble, Velgrind said with a beautiful smile. Currently at Luminous' call, heroes from all over the world are gathering at the Lubelius border. The hero Masyuki is there as a representative, and Velgrind wants to prioritize that. In fact, even if troops are dispatched from afar, they will not make it in time, so Velgrind's help is essential. That's why I have to help with that, so I want to leave the activities here to you. Even if we ignore the impact on the Earth, there is no doubt that someone is behind Lady Velzard. It's not their intended purpose, so I don't know the details. But I definitely sense their presence. If Guy and the others' battle intensifies, the impact on this planet will become more serious. Even if it's fine for now, we must not forget to respond to this. Moreover, with the existence of a new player who could sway the war situation, it was a situation that made Testaros's head ache. But at that moment, a thought transmission arrived from an unexpected person. Call for my idiots. If we are going to fight Ivrigay and Damargania, there's no point in having them guard Leon's place. Surprisingly, Guy, who was fighting Velzard, interrupted their conversation. Testarossa was impressed that he was able to send out his thoughts in this dense magical blizzard. Oh, Guy was listening too. You have time for eavesdropping, Testarossa retorted. Guy elegantly ignored this and continued. RETURNP a GE35 321, there's someone behind Velzard, isn't there? I also felt something was strange. That's why I was just watching the situation, but I need to settle things before Ivrigay gets here. What are you trying to say? You should get to work too, Testarossa. Testarossa gave a wry smile. Being told that she had acquired a lazy habit similar to her masterate is a compliment to say that she resembles her beloved Rimuru. But she is not happy with the acknowledgement of the lazy habit. Besides, Rimuru is not slacking off or anything, but is just busy with various things. Testarossa's reluctance to immediately comply with Guy's requests is not out of spite. Well, there was no doubt that he was annoyed by requests from Guy, but Testarossa fully supported Rimuru, so she ignored what Guy said without giving it much thought. Well, I'll let Rain and Mizari take over maintaining the protective barrier, and Moss, you will assist them. Understood. Since there are only two possible answers, yes or understood, Moss had no choice but to answer immediately. Velgrind, Moss's last hope, did not seem to think that Moss was insufficient either. Well, I'll leave this to you. And with those words, she simply dissipated her other body. A few seconds later, the remnants of Velgrind's power connected with another space. A transfer gate appeared, and Rain and Misery arrived. Thus, the war situation in the White World entered a new phase. Rain began to complain as soon as she arrived. RETURNP a GE36 321. It's cold. Even I, a primordial, am freezing. That comment, not reading the atmosphere, was as dignified as expected. However, Testarossa is there. Be quiet. Everyone is working diligently, so you shouldn't complain. It might not have been a problem if it was just Mizari that scolded her, who always spoils her, but this time she got angry. I can't help it. I guess I'll have to get serious for the first time in a while. Rain said this with a dissatisfied look on her face and began to construct magic to reinforce Moss's barrier. Moss, aren't you perhaps stronger than me? Haha, you're joking. Since it would be troublesome to get involved, Moss brushed off Rain's words. However, Rain was not the type to be convinced by that. This barrier can withstand most attacks, right? Moss's barrier was constructed to protect only Sauka and Moss himself. Its strength was at a considerable level, and it perfectly neutralized the aftershocks of the attacks generated by Guy and Velzard. Well, survival is the priority. My subordinates can't handle this level. Same here. He is incomparable to Khan and the others. Mizari agreed with Rain's statement. Moss didn't mind being praised, but he did not get carried away here. He knows that praising someone to death and then pushing chores on them is what Rain is best at. RETURNP a GE37 321, therefore, in order to preempt it, he decided to assign work. Have connected my barrier to the protective barrier that Velgrind-sama had constructed here. I will hand over the leadership to Rain-sama, so Mizari-sama, please make the adjustments. Making a request of the two primordials, who are far superior to me, is a foolish act akin to suicide. However, this is an emergency, and it is in line with the plan set by Testarossa. Moss had judged that this much should be forgiven, and his guess was correct. As expected of Testarossa's adjutant, you're truly excellent. It seems that now is not the time for discussion, so that's fine with me, Mizari readily agreed. The next moment, Moss's burden was instantly lightened. As Mizari had said that, she had begun to intervene. The sensation of holding the raging reins with all his might disappeared, and Moss breathed a sigh of relief. However, it was not yet a situation where he could be careless. Don't understand why I'm assisting and you're leading, but oh well. Rain, who had finished grasping Moss's barrier, forcibly seized the leadership. Even for Moss, who was skilled in precise manipulation of magical power, it was a miracle. Amazing, Moss was astonished. As Rain herself said, Moss might be stronger than Rain in a fight. Although he could not say for sure because he had never tried it, Moss thought that he would win if he devised a plan and prepared thoroughly. After all, Moss's ultimate technique, Infinite Eater, can surely destroy an enemy with an amount of magic or energy equal to or less than his own. It is pointless if the enemy escapes, so it must be used at the most critical moment, but it is the secret weapon that makes Moss undefeated. RETURNP, a GE38 321 Rain, and Misery have similar amounts of magic or energy to Moss, so it is not surprising that they would think that they could win if they fought well. However, that was a misunderstanding. Even if I used the Infinite Eater against Rain-sama, it probably wouldn't work. To think that there was such a difference in ability, as expected of a primordial. Moss strengthened his awe for the 7 pillars. He reflected that he had become arrogant, and from this day onward he began to be careful not to be pushy. That aside, what about Rain? What is this? Why does Moss have more magical powers than me? She was inwardly in a great hurry. In fact, Moss's numerical value was slightly higher, although she jokingly asked, "Aren't you perhaps stronger than me?" It was half serious. In the past, she had been given a hard time by Tensura. Although she had conveniently erased the memory of that humiliation, the feeling of embarrassment, frustration, continued to smolder deep in her heart. And now, the fact that she was on the verge of losing to Tensura's subordinates was enough to trample Rain's pride. Rain was not just thinking, "Should I get serious?" But he got super serious and took the leadership of the protective barrier from Moss. It's not just a matter of being immature. For Rain, this was war. Moss probably thought he had taken the initiative, but the same was true for Rain. She showed off her strength to the fullest against Moss, who was not even aware of fighting. Thus, Rain's face was saved, and the situation turned around for the better. While looking sideways at such Rain, Misery was impressed. RETURNP, a GE39 321, it was not just Moss's skill, but also the amazing Rain's magic manipulation, which she saw after a long time, captivated her without words. As expected of Rain. If this child always put in her full effort, even Lord Guy would value her more. She is thinking such things, but she is not aware of her own shortcomings. Moreover, from Rain's point of view, it would be meddling. Because being given more credit means having more work to do, Rain is a demon who lives for her hobbies, so she hates work that is forced on her by others. Work is something that you find yourself. She is wasting her diverse talents, thinking that it is enough if she can earn enough to eat. However, Rain can live without eating, and if she has any trouble, she relies on Misery and her subordinates, so there was no particular problem. To put it bluntly, an environment where she doesn't have to work was in place. In other words, Misery, who is cooperating with her, is also at fault, so it could be said that it is Misery's fault that Rain put in her full effort. Not realizing this is Misery's fatal flaw. But since she is so happy to take care of Rain, it seems this problem will not be solved in the future. Anyway, it is true that Misery was influenced by Rain. This worked well this time as well, and Mizari's magical adjustments were also motivated. She eliminated the vulnerability of the protective barrier, while meticulously examining it so that Rain could move easily. As a result, the impact on this land became so slight that it more than compensated for the hole that Velgrind had left. Tensura smiled at the situation. Sauka's protection was also perfect, and with this, all worries were gone. The only thing left was RETURNP, a GE40 321 now, who is hiding. Muttering this, Tensura looked up at the battlefield in the sky, where a fierce battle was taking place. Asterisk Guy had been fighting Velzard in the air for a long time, but he wasn't tired. That's because neither of them were serious. A white world. All living things that inhabit this land, including the flowers and trees, have all turned into ice statues. This meant that they could be revived if Velzard's power was released. Even from that point of view, Velzard's aim seemed to be different from Feldway's. However, Guy's words did not get through to Velzard. He tried to persuade her to stop doing foolish things, but she did not listen. Velzard wore a bewitching smile and repeated her attacks on Guy. All of them are like childish pranks, but because the magic power contained is enormous, it is dangerous if you are careless. So, although Guy didn't need to get serious, he couldn't ignore Velzard's every move either. Both of them were trying to gauge each other's true potential, and gradually increasing the power of their techniques. There were also occasional attacks that might be considered fatal, but they were both familiar with each other. They were instantly seen through and nullified. These were such a natural flow that RETURNP a GE 41, 321, even a third party with outstanding abilities would not be able to distinguish them from other attacks. That was how far apart Guy and Velzard's abilities were from everyone else. Neither of them wasted any energy. Velzard was currently the strongest, dragon kind, second only to Veldanava. Since she can generate magic power inexhaustibly within her body, the concept of a war of attrition did not apply to her. Strictly speaking, she needs specific conditions to be in that invincible state. That is, to complete the eternally frozen world, which is the white-closed world, frozen by the magical element snowstorm. In this space where the ice and snow are raging, Velzard's magic power circulates. Because the recovery speed exceeds the consumption speed, the inexhaustible magic power is generated as a result. If Velgrind were to use high-powered arts repeatedly, she would eventually become exhausted. However, against Velzard, the strategy of attrition would be meaningless. Guy knew that. Even among the dragon kind, who are already the epitome of injustice, Velzard was in a class of her own. To oppose her, he needed to keep his own consumption to an absolute minimum. However, this was easy for Guy to do. Instead of using his own magical power, Guy used the magical energy floating in space, just like a human with little magical power. It took time to gather magical energy from space, and the efficiency of magic activation was also poor. However, if you consider it in terms of consumption rate, it allowed him to conserve his own power. Also, when Guy used it, the magic's accuracy and power were impeccable. The only problem was that almost all magic didn't work on Velzard. Well, that's the problem, though. If it didn't work, there was no point. Even if he understood that, it was better than using his own magic power to attack. He had to attack repeatedly to find an opening in Velzard, otherwise he wouldn't be able to defeat her. He had to save his magic power for the final blow. For this reason, Guy was engaged in a mind-blowing battle of nerves, but he showed no signs of fatigue, which was impressive. RETURNP a GE 42, 321, Guy narrowed his eyes in amazement as he looked at Velzard. He wondered why she wasn't getting serious. If Velzard unleashed a great technique, he planned to counterattack and make a move. However, as if she was sticking to her ways, Velzard was consistently watching the situation. TCH, I didn't think it would be the same as when we fought at first, but I'm surprised that she has become so patient. Is selfish and capricious. She has lived a life unrelated to patience. The first time she fought Guy, she got angry when Guy didn't do what she wanted and made a mistake in her haste to win. Knowing Velzard's personality well, Guy intended to set similar traps this time as well. However, Velzard had no openings. The ice and snow imbued with magical power destroyed all of the traps Guy had set, even though I have become much stronger than I was at that time. Since he had assumed that he could win more easily, he had no choice but to acknowledge Velzard's growth. And the situation was becoming more and more unfavorable for Guy with every passing moment. Velzard's magical power was enormous, and the magical power that gushed out from her raged like a blizzard. A magical frozen earth that did not allow the existence of life was nearing completion in this land. Heaven and earth were filled with Velzard's magic power, and they bared their fangs at Guy as she willed. That alone could be dealt with, but while continuing to observe, Guy felt a sense of discomfort. Velzard's behavior pattern was clearly unnatural. Velzard was good at brute force, relying on her own power. Because she is an absolute powerhouse, there was no need to play tricks. However, now she was using her tactics with great care. Rather than being surprised that she was able to fight in such a way, it was more natural to suspect that someone's intentions were involved. He didn't think she was being controlled by someone. However, Guy decided to face Velzard on the premise that there was a third party, and it seemed that his choice was correct. Thanks to his careful attention on the battlefield, he learned that Tensura and the others had arrived here. He learned their purpose and even understood the current world situation. RETURNP a GE43 321. What happened to Rimuru? No, more importantly, Ivrage is coming. I have no choice but to deal with him. It seemed that this was going to happen, and Guy felt bitter. Velzard alone was a problem, but the worst-case scenario had arrived. However, there was good news. Thanks to Tensura, the existence of a third party was certain. Moreover, he could leave that person to her. There were few people with the ability that Guy recognized. Maybe if I try hard, I can do something. But I absolutely refuse to fawn on that damn bastard. I don't even want to act it out. How would she fight if it were her act while letting Twilight let down his guard and buy some time? That was the only thing Rain had concluded. But at the same time, she gave up before even trying, saying, I absolutely don't want to do it, so it's impossible. However, if it were Tensura, it would be a different story. Even compared to when Rain fought her, she was in a completely different league. What's more, Tensura was cunning and the most calculating of the primordials. There is no way she would stand in front of an enemy without a chance of winning, so there was a little hope. Tensura probably knows her own weaknesses. I also heard that she fought well against that Velgrind-sama, and if I cheer her on with all my might, she should be able to manage somehow. Rain's support was worth nothing to Tensura. But since Rain had a very high opinion of herself, she assumed that Tensura would be happy too. And so, she prepared to watch the outcome of the battle with great interest. *RETURNP a GE61 321 now. As for Tensura, even though she was annoyed by the chatter of the people around her, she didn't forget what she had to do. The formula for victory had already been completed within Tensura's mind. What's the matter, aren't you coming? Twilight provoked with a condescending tone. Without responding, Tensura quietly deepened her smile. What's so funny? You shouldn't be in a position to be so relaxed. Twilight asked, suspicious of Tensura's attitude. Tensura responded with a sneer. That's ridiculous. Maybe you still think you have the advantage. Hearing this response, Twilight looked suspicious. It was an abnormally bullish attitude, different from what Twilight had expected. Good grief. This is why I hate people who don't know their place. I did turn to dust with a blow from my beloved daughter Lumina's. But that wasn't a defeat. It was just an unavoidable experiment. He had intended to provoke Tensura to become serious in order to test the performance of the dragon-like body. But he did not expect her to make such a misguided statement. Twilight was disappointed. Well, it can't be helped. You guys believe that you're the strongest, so you have a habit of looking down on your opponents. But if you don't cultivate an eye to see through the truly strong, you'll have a painful experience, Twilight warned from the bottom of his heart. Of course, this was a statement full of intentions to hurt Tensura. However, Tensura was unfazed. She continued to smile fearlessly, as if she didn't even notice Twilight. This isn't funny, Twilight thought, becoming displeased. RETURNP a GE62 321. I don't like that attitude. I was thinking of having a little fun, but I'm going to stop now. Saying this, he released the fighting spirit he has been holding back. It was undoubtedly the spirit of a dragon. The pseudo-dragon body was the culmination of Twilight's research. When researching ubiquitous immortality, the destination was the dragon kind. They are immortal beings that, even if they die and their personality is reset, their soul is perfectly reproduced over time. But Twilight wasn't satisfied with just that. If the inheritance of the heart core wasn't also perfect, then it could truly be called the ultimate life form, or so she thought. Even if memories are inherited, if the personality that utilizes them is different, they cannot be recognized as the same being. Conversely, even if they dwell in a different body, if the heart core is the same, would it be dismissed as a completely different person, the core of the soul, the most important memory, and heart core? What should be done to reproduce this? Twilight's research was devoted to that. Using herself as a test subject, she was able to successfully replicate her memories relatively easily. By synchronizing with the many clones that had been prepared in advance, Twilight's memories would not be lost even after death. Needless to say, Velgrin's other body was the model for this. Next, regarding the reproduction of the most important personality, the heart core, this was difficult. Something without form, something that changes over time. The heart core was a fleeting thing. Unless one was able to freeze even their own heart like Velzard, it was impossible to maintain the same state forever. However, Twilight's madness was quite impressive, as he had found a way out here. Velzard-sama, I have a request. Could you freeze this heart core of mine with your power? He made such a request and took the means of having his own heart core protected by Velzard. On top of that, he let the duplicated memories dwell in his own body and continued to do as he pleased. The synchronization of memories was perfect, and it was undoubtedly the real thing Twilight himself. It was inevitable that even Luminous could not tell the difference due to the circumstances. And now, RETURNP a GE63, 321 Twilight had created a powerful body from Velzard's magical energy as the ultimate body. He housed the regenerated soul in this, and the memory synchronization was also perfect. And that's not all. Because it was created from Velzard's body, it possessed combat capabilities that were truly comparable to the dragon kind. He could declare that even a primordial demon was not an enemy. Moreover, even if an unforeseen situation occurred, Twilight's heart core was protected by Velzard. If he created a new dragon-like body, he could resurrect without any loss. Well, there is no such thing as an unlikely event. This power is equal to Velzard, and even if the opponent is the White Queen Tensura, there is no way I can lose. Twilight was full of confidence. Although her amount of magic essence energy couldn't compare to Velzard's, his magic power was equal. In addition to this, he had her own authority, so there was no way he could lose, or that was Twilight's honest feeling. Twilight's authority, that was the unique skill, greed, but it is different now. Twilight, by researching the unique skill he acquired, completely grasped its nature. On top of that, he released what he duplicated and fused with his own ego as the seed of greed. The freed unique skill, greed, is drawn to the most greedy person. Then, after going through many hosts, it went to Maria Bell. Eventually, it was inherited by Yuuki. Twilight observed the process. Eye information was always synchronized from the pseudo-personality dwelling in the unique skill, greed. By analyzing that, Twilight's research made a big leap. When it resided in Yuuki, she even had the opportunity to experience the strength of the demon Lord Guy. Guy was such a dangerous opponent that he even cut off synchronization and had it respond in automatic mode. It would have been the end if Yuuki had died, but he survived with mysterious good luck. RETURNP a GE64 321, thanks to that, he was able to resume the synchronization of memories. And he obtained valuable information. This was the process by which Yuuki sacrificed greed to obtain the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of Greed, Mammon. It was a stroke of good luck that the details were revealed. The pseudo-personality of Twilight that was housed in Yuuki was manipulated by Michael. The synchronization was cancelled at that point, so it is unknown what is happening now. He heard that Yuuki had died, so he probably disappeared long ago, but such trivial matters were of no concern. Because Twilight himself had reached the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of Greed, Ammon. That was the authority that Twilight had obtained. Neither good nor evil, just someone who purely desires everything. An existence that fulfills intellectual curiosity as it is determined to be. And unable to suppress his desire to know, he tries to see what the outcome will be. No matter how much chaos the world may fall into, to Twilight, the result is what matters. What's important is to obtain results, and then to develop them and use them in the future. For that sole purpose, Twilight has spent everything. Since there is no malice in it, it has become a purer embodiment of vice. This is the divine ancestor, Twilight Valentine, the ultimate egoist. Twilight will do anything for himself, regardless of whether it is a good or bad deed. And so, inevitably, he could no longer turn away from a certain question. What lies beyond the ultimate, if even ultimate ability, ultimate skill? King of Greed, Ammon, was offered as a sacrifice. What would one gain? Twilight's true worth lies in his determination to resolve this question. And he obtained it. A terrible result that should never have happened. Ultimate ability, ultimate skill. King of evil, Angramaniu, this is the ultimate. It was a terrifying power that surpassed even the powers of the deadly sins, forming the counterpart to the powers created by Veldanava. Its main powers are diverse, including thought acceleration, omnipotent perception, analysis and appraisal, creation of all things, ability duplication, ability synchronization, space-time manipulation, multidimensional barrier, and eternal return. Although he specializes in creation and research, he is also unparalleled in combat. The culmination of Twilight's research, the pseudo-dragon form, was also completed by this evil King Angra Mainyu. As long as Velzard existed, Twilight was immortal and invincible. RETURNP a GE65 321, Twilight released his dragon aura and intimidated Tensura. The existence value of the pseudo-dragon form was overwhelming, nearly 10 times that of Tensura. Twilight can't quantify it, but there is no doubt that the difference between them is vast. It was because he understood this that Twilight was at ease. Although she is older than me, she is ultimately a resident of the spiritual world who does not even have a physical body. Even though she has been incarnated, I have the advantage in the material world. Moreover, my physical performance is overwhelmingly superior. Twilight laughs, saying that there is no way he can lose to Tensura, who seems to have misunderstood her position. Thus, the battle between Tensura and Twilight began. And several hours passed. Both are still alive and well. They face each other in the air. What is Feldway's plan? Has Milim, who arrived in Sarian, still going on a rampage? How much fighting power has been gathered by Lumina's End Times proclamation? Will humanity be able to confront the large army of cryptids, led by the world destruction dragon, Ivrige? And what would become of the fools who entered the labyrinth? Forgetting all such concerns, Tensura focused on her opponent, Twilight. The equation for victory has already been completed, but deciphering it is not easy. It is only Tensura who can push the situation forward without any danger. She proceeded carefully so that Twilight would not notice. Meanwhile, Twilight also felt something was off. Ha 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 ha, what's wrong? There's no way that magic would work on me. He easily erased the successive nuclear attacks that Tensura had unleashed with a time lag. With overwhelming computational ability, he overwrote Tensura's magic. Normally, this would be an astonishing level of skill. Even so, it was Twilight who was inwardly irritated. RETURNP a GE66 321. Something is wrong. It is natural that Tensura's attack does not work on me, but why is she still healthy? To endure against me for several hours, no matter how you look at it, it doesn't make sense. That's right. All of Tensura's attacks were easily neutralized. And of course he is launching a counterattack, but Tensura is still healthy. Though stained with blood, she is floating in the sky with a dignified appearance. Moreover, she hadn't lost her fighting spirit from the very start. White Flash Annihilation Flame Tyrant. Twilight was engulfed in the white flames. TCH, this is what happens the moment I let my guard down. She was aiming for this from the beginning. For the past few hours, whenever Twilight's attention wandered to think about Tensura, powerful magic was used as if she had aimed for it. There is no significant damage, but it cannot be ignored. Twilight had no choice but to regain consciousness and concentrate on Tensura. This was quietly becoming a source of irritation. It would be no problem to ignore it as it would recover almost instantly, but the opponent was Tensura. Twilight understood that it was important not to let his guard down, but the monotonous repetition had made Twilight become complacent. Irritation and complacency, and the resulting carelessness. In that instant, he was hit with a powerful blow. The magic stimulated Twilight's sense of pain. It was so powerful that it reminded him of death. And that was only natural. Flash Annihilation Flame Tyrant was the ultimate anti-personnel magic that Tensura had created with her own ultimate skill. King of the Dead Belial, Twilight's pseudo-dragon body, was burned to ashes in an instant, but that didn't matter. It regenerated perfectly as if nothing had happened. My goodness, you never learn your lesson. I told you that no matter what you do, it won't work on me. Twilight looked down on Tensura in exasperation and sneered. It was an act of hiding the irritation he felt inside. No matter what attack she used, he wouldn't die. But he couldn't shake the RETURNP a GE67 321 anxiety that he must have overlooked something big. A sense of discomfort and unease. It was a warning bell that Twilight's instincts were telling him. However, Twilight ignored it. He had heard that the White Flash Annihilation Flame Tyrant that he had just received was Tensura's strongest technique. The blow, strengthened by the authority of the ultimate skill, was heavy. And when it came to her strongest technique, it was on a different level to the magic she had used so far. Even Twilight's pride and joy, her pseudo-dragon body, was broken through the many layers of protective barriers he had placed around it, and was burned to ashes in an instant. That was proof of just how dangerous Tensura was, but that was all. Since even her strongest attack was meaningless, Tensura had no chance of winning. Knowing this, Twilight sneered with confidence. Tensura, whose strongest technique was ineffective, was surprised. No, it should be added that it was surprising for Twilight. Tensura had expected this outcome from the beginning. Everything up to this point, including the fact that Twilight would get carried away and ridicule her, was according to Tensura's plan. Tensura is very cunning and calm. Even her trump card, White Flare, was merely one card in her hand. And by using a variety of techniques to fix Twilight's attention on herself, she was able to prevent him from noticing a bigger trap. Twilight was certainly strong. If one were to simply compare their combat abilities, there was no doubt that he surpassed Tensura. However, the match was even rather, the state of the game was in Tensura's hands. That was the difference in combat experience between them. It was rare for Tensura to act on her own, but she used her wit to give orders to her subordinates with her intellect. It is Tensura's strength that she has the combat sense to make use of such experience. Really foolish, Tensura said, deepening her smile. Her eyes are not those of someone who is desperate because her trump card has been broken. She clearly looked down on Twilight. At this point, even the conceited Twilight finally noticed the true nature of the discomfort. I see. I thought something was strange, but you didn't take much damage from my attacks, right? Were you pretending to be hit on purpose? Unlike Twilight, who recovered instantly, Tensura's wounds continued to grow. There were no major ones that would be fatal, but there were many discolored scars on her bare skin, where her RETURNP, a GE-68, 321 military uniform was torn. They were burns, cuts, and impact marks. It was undoubtedly something that Twilight's attack directly hit and was created. But that's why if she had been hit by such a powerful attack, it was unnatural for her to still be active. No matter how much damage she had mitigated, the power of Twilight's techniques was no joke. The techniques unleashed from his body, which imitated the strongest dragon species, were enough to slaughter even a demon lord species in one blow. And yet, the reason why Tensura is healthy is that she was only pretending to be hit directly. Or it's possible that she didn't really take much damage now. If that were the case, there would be no point in leaving traces, would there? Interesting. What is she aiming for? Because he is invincible, Twilight is not afraid. Because he is arrogant and believes he can handle anything, he finds it fun to try to figure out what Tensura is thinking. That was Twilight's bad habit and weakness. Tensura was well aware of Twilight's personality. You haven't grown at all. What are you talking about? I've become much stronger than before. HMPH, you're hopeless. Your way of fighting is childish. You enjoy tormenting opponents who are less powerful than you, don't you? Just like a child who enjoys crushing an ant's nest. What's wrong with that? Not saying it's wrong. I just think it's foolish. That was Tensura's true feelings. It's fine to look down on someone you can beat, but tormenting them is out of the question. This is especially true if it's a battle you can't afford to lose. If there's a difference in strength, you should finish them off quickly. And above all, you shouldn't give your opponent time to devise a strategy. You think I'm foolish? What a strange thing to say. It's a fact, but I'll thank you, because thanks to that I can win. It is an unbelievable foolish act from Tensura's point of view, but this time she was saved by it. By being able to use Twilight's bad habits, the conditions for Tensura to win were met. RETURNP, a GE-69 321, that's stupid. No matter what you do, you can't make up for this difference in strength. Twilight laughed at Tensura's words, but then quickly withdrew his smile. He sensed an abnormality in Tensura. Not only the traces of the wounds, but even the tears in her uniform had been repaired. How on earth did she manage to do that? Twilight wondered. Her seductive smile was full of confidence, and she didn't seem cornered. Does she really think she can beat me? That's impossible. No matter how many attacks he receives, Twilight can revive. Even when it comes to energy loss, Tensura is at a disadvantage. Twilight's pseudo-dragon body is constructed from Velzard's magical powers floating in the air. Even if he is reduced to dust, he can regenerate instantly, so there is no way to defeat him. And mentally, having his heart core protected in Velzard, even if his soul is shattered, he can resurrect, truly invincible. No matter who her opponent is, Twilight is confident that he can defeat even Veldanava. Therefore, there is no way he could lose to the likes of Tensura. Well, I'll destroy your confidence. I'll show you the true power of my authority, ultimate ability, ultimate skill. King of Evil Angramaniu, Twilight declared, his golden and silver demonic eyes heterochromia, shining eerily, asterisk ultimate ability, ultimate skill. King of Evil Angramaniu is the most terrible authority in the world. It is the will to kill a god itself, and can also be said to be an authority used exclusively against Veldanava. Surpassing one's parents, in other words, God Killer. Twilight also bore that karma. The reason he had Luminas kill him was to observe the process of achieving that karma. He intended to kill Veldanava with perfect preparation after considering all kinds of cases. Since Veldanava was not resurrected, that ambition remained unfulfilled. However, in return, ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of Evil Angramaniu was further refined and increased its ferocity. RETURNP, a GE 7321, it is an authority at the top of the Great Sin series, but it does not have the right to dominate lower authorities such as ultimate dominion. Since the demon-type abilities are inherently free, they are immune to being dominated. That is why there was no coercive domination ability such as Regalia Dominion. In the first place, it can be said that there is no need for such a thing. Because ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of Evil Angramaniu has the power to kill and reduce everything to nothing. The end result for all living beings is death. Leading anyone, no matter what, to a place they cannot escape is the eternal recurrence of Angramaniu, which specializes in trampling on the free will of others. You will continue to perish in my world, eternal twilight. Tensura was assailed by malice. The embodiment of vice, which even feeds on the resentful voices of the dead in hell, that is the essence of Angramaniu. It was a despicable power, more vicious and disgusting than that of the demons, who feed on human emotions. The effect was tremendous. The King of Evil, Angramaniu, boasts the ability Eternal Recurrence, which exerts a terrifying effect by trapping all beings within its range in a pseudo-hell, causing them to experience nightmares for eternity until the world disappears. Those who are captured are not allowed to be liberated, and they must face the end of the world. And their cries of anguish and resentment only make the King of Evil, Angramaniu, grow stronger. If one is targeted by this, there is no way to escape, and even if one is a primordial demon accustomed to hell, they will end up repeating the nightmare of being destroyed and reborn again and again. And so their souls become exhausted, and eventually they will return to nothing. Will come first, the end of the world or this? Twilight, looking forward to finding out, cried out with joy. My malice will destroy even a god. Even if you are an older existence than me, someone like you would never be able to the darkness of the end, the embodiment of despair, tried to engulf the white world but nothing happened. Tensura was floating back where she was, looking happy. RETURNP, a GE 71-321, Twilight was utterly shocked. The familiar feeling was the same as when she had received unexpected experimental results. But unlike then, he wasn't excited. He just couldn't accept reality. You seem puzzled. How foolish of you to not even realize it. Why are you unharmed? Twilight didn't even care that he was mocked for being stupid. He wanted to know the reason. Tensura had to be dead. There was no way such a ridiculous story could exist, like she was completely unharmed. But that was just Twilight's convenience, and Tensura had no obligation to go along with it. She simply carried out the role given to her. Tensura's cherry-colored lips curved in an evil arc, and she announced despair. You want to know what destruction is like, don't you? Good for you, I'll tell you. Right now the preparation is over. As soon as she finished saying that, Tensura deepened her cold smile, and then she carried out the plan that she was preparing from the beginning. Nihilistic end, the world was dyed white. Originally, it was a whiteout due to Velzard's ice and snow, but the world was covered with a white darkness that overwhelmed it. Kidding me, right? I can't see what's going on outside at all. Well, I've been there for a long time now. That's surprising. It's not that Moss's barrier is amazing, it's that there's an invisible membrane on its surface. As expected of Tensura, she's worthy of drawing with me. voices of those watching from the sidelines could be heard. Each of them had different feelings, but they all shared the fact that they were shocked. RETURNP a GE72, 321, except for Sauka. Velzard's ice and snow also disrupted her magic, so even magic perception was useless. Since she had been in a completely white-out state for a long time, her senses had long ago become numb. The reason she didn't go mad was because she could see inside Moss's barrier only. This time, it seemed like she was painted over with even more white, but Sauka couldn't tell the difference. Something ridiculous must have happened, she thought, and looked upon it as if it had nothing to do with her. On the other hand, Twilight had no time to relax. He was trying to grasp the situation with his mind working at maximum speed, accelerating his thoughts by millions, even tens of millions of times. What happened? My eternal Twilight was perfect, so why is Tensura safe? But more importantly, what is this white darkness? The white was eating away at Twilight's body. It was happening at a speed that exceeded the speed at which his body could regenerate. No, calm down. Even if my body turns to dust, I can just create another dragon body. Right now, it's more important to find out what Tensura did. Regardless of what happens to his own body, he put it aside and tried to resume the situation analysis. At that moment, Tensura's thoughts reached her infinitely delayed thinking domain. I wonder, how do you feel about experiencing true destruction? Interesting. I understand a little of what you did. You left the void that you used to find my existence as it is. That's right. That's amazing. To maintain this so naturally while fighting me. Twilight praised her wholeheartedly. RETURNP a GE73 321, the void is an energy of ultimate destruction. It is a common sense to think that it is a wasteful act to naturally melt it into the ice and snow and maintain it in a harmless state as it is. Because the consumption cost is too large, it is more effective to use it for attack as soon as possible. Moreover, it was an incomprehensible act from Twilight's point of view to keep it hidden until the moment of attack. That is why he overlooked it, but he has no sense of crisis. Certainly, because he received a direct hit from the void, his current body will be annihilated, including the soul. However, since Twilight will be completely regenerated, it was completely meaningless. This is perfect immortality. The reason for invincibility. But then a miscalculation occurred. Tensura muttered in exasperation. As I thought, you don't seem to understand. My void was not summoned from hell. With a look of saying, what on earth are you talking about? Twilight looked at Tensura. What was there was an absolute monarch who was laughing with an ecstatic expression. This power is proof that he is still alive. I opened the door in the depths of my chest and felt a definite breath. What are you talking about? I wanted to feel it more, but it seems it's about time to say goodbye. Tensura was cautious. Unlike Zijin, she would not try to exceed her capacity. She knew that she would not succeed even if she tried. However, even the prescribed amount was sufficiently threatening. Tensura's ultimate ability, ultimate skill, king of the Deadbalil, was the authority closest to death. Among them, Afterlife was the authority that could handle the hellish flames. RETURNP a GE74 321, void. Therefore, the void collapse, borrowed from Rimuru, could be safely exercised with the prescribed amount, power given, and by combining it with her own nihilistic world, she was able to control the extremely dangerous world as her own. The void also devours information particles. To put it strictly, it erases the information written in the information particles. Any and all orders are meaningless if they cannot be transmitted. Even if the information is synchronized instantly across time and space, if the information particles in which the information is written are interfered with. That's stupid. My heart isn't responding. Course, isn't it? I've been playing with you for a long time, but I'm getting tired of it. So I have to put an end to it. Leaving those words behind, Tensura's thought left. Twilight's thought domain becomes lonely again. What? You're saying all this white darkness is void? Ridiculous. There's no way that could happen. To control the already difficult void, to the point that it fills the space, even if it is isolated, is something that no one can do as far as Twilight knows. To give an example, it is like taking on 1,000 shogi players called masters of all ages at the same time and dominantly controlling the board. You cannot lose your concentration even for a moment, and one mistake is not allowed. Even so, it's a dream beyond dreams, a feat that's impossible even in stories. From the past to the present, yes, even Veldanava shouldn't have been able to pull off such a feat. What on earth is going on? Twilight's consciousness is swallowed up by the white darkness and disappears. Although his intellectual curiosity should have been satisfied after receiving an answer from Tensura, a new question arose, and his heart was left unsatisfied. RETURNP, a GE75 321, asterisk those inside Moss's barrier, had difficulty finding out what was going on outside. Even so, without knowing the details of the battle, they somehow thought that Tensura would win. It was because they couldn't imagine Tensura losing, and they felt a fundamental fear from the white darkness that filled the outside. This was especially evident in Moss. Oh no, Lady Tensura seems to be quite angry. He was able to sense her briefly before the white closed around him, and Tensura's whole body was covered in wounds. She seemed to have recovered properly, but that didn't mean she was okay. The problem was that the proud White Queen's body was damaged. That meant that Twilight's attack had come into contact with Tensura's orb, Soul Core. If Tensura only used magic, this would not have happened. She would have attacked from a distance, never letting him get close. However, that did not seem to be the case. Perhaps Twilight's skill in fighting had made Tensura abandon her pride. Even so, it was an unbelievable event for Moss. If the opponent was a dragon kind like Velgrind, she could have endured it. However, her opponent was a divine ancestor. Although he was feared as one of the ancient gods, Tensura, who is one of the 7 lords, he is not an opponent to pay respect to. Well, I admit that he is strong, but Tensura-sama is not good at close combat. I'm not good at it either, you know. Well, she's not good at it. Rain and Mizari responded to Moss's muttered words. Sauka remained silent, but there were mixed feelings. I'm good at hand-to-hand combat, but I'm weaker than those who say they're not good at it. It's a blunt statement, but sadly it's the truth. Leaving Sauka's sadness behind, the conversation continued. RETURNP, a GE76 321, but it's strange. What is? Moss thought for a moment to explain the discomfort before speaking. Tensura-sama is good at defense. Of course, she is not kind enough to fight in the opponent's forte, so the current situation itself seems unnatural to me. In fact, Tensura was engaging in close combat. She used magic but stayed in place while dealing with Twilight's attacks. It certainly seemed like an unusual move for Tensura, who excels at long-distance attacks to avoid taking any damage. Rain and Mizari nodded after hearing the explanation. I see. Well, that's true, isn't it? I'll do anything to win, too. I'll bring it to my forte without question. That's right. Even so, Tensura didn't do that. Which means there was a reason for that. I have a question at this point. Sauka timidly opened her mouth. What is it? Moss urged, hiding his true feelings that it was too much trouble. There was nothing Sauka could do in this situation, so Moss wanted him to stay quiet. There is nothing that Sauka can do in this situation, so Moss wants her to stay quiet. So he didn't care much about Sauka's opinion, but his eyes widened when he heard it. Tensura-sans, what was it again? Nihilistic world, was it? What happened? RETURNP, a GE77 321, come to think of it, Moss remembered. Tensura deployed Nihilistic World and found Twilight, who was hiding here. That was the first stage, and it was in attack standby mode. If she were to attack from here, everything within the range of effect designated by Tensura would be exposed to the fierce power of the void. Regardless of friend or foe, a set amount of energy would be offset and they would be annihilated. Moss and Sauka had no way of escaping, so the fact that they were still alive meant that Tensura had not released void. Or rather, to begin with, even Lady Tensura would be unable to maintain void for a long time. That's why she must have deactivated it a long time ago. That was Moss's impression. No, it was his wish. Perhaps the reason Tensura didn't use her speciality in magical combat was because she was dedicating her energy to something else. No, that can't be the case. Moss denied his own thoughts. Fighting for a long time with the extremely dangerous void deployed would be insane no matter how you look at it. Just in case, if Tensura were to lose consciousness even for a moment during the battle, the uncontrolled void would be unleashed. She seemed to be receiving blows from Twilight, and there was a high possibility that she would lose consciousness momentarily. Even just controlling the void normally consumes energy, so from Moss's point of view, constant deployment is impossible. Surely she wouldn't take such a risk. It's okay, right, Tensura-sama? As if swallowing his uneasy feelings, Moss prayed. However, the person he was praying to was Tensura, so there was no way his wish would be granted. But you know, Moss-kun, it looks like void, no matter how you look at it. That's right. No matter how you look at it, it's exerting its aggression and corroding twilight. It was Rain and Misery who told so in a heartless voice. Even without them pointing it out, Moss had already noticed it. No way. RETURNP a GE78 321. So, in the unlikely event, no, even in the 1 in a billion chance, there was a risk that the world would be destroyed. As soon as he realized this, Moss nearly collapsed. Tensura-san is really amazing. I thought that if you were going to attack in that second stage, we would all die too. Sauka, who didn't understand anything, gave a slightly off-topic comment. Yeah. Rain gave a wry smile to cover it up. Die, or rather, yeah, it might be better not to know. Do you still want to hear? Speaking as if about to explain and then clouding the words, Misery looked at Sauka enviously. With just that, Sauka realized. No, there's no need. I wanted to know the information as a secret agent, but I'll let that go for now. It was Sauka's strength that she could choose peace of mind over a sense of responsibility here. But that was the right decision. Even if they had explained that the world was on the verge of collapse, Sauka would not have been able to accept it. Rain and Mizari, who had made that judgment, also had a surprisingly gentle side. While everyone was lost in thoughts, Twilight's existence disappeared. Rain was overjoyed to see this. All right, that damn Twilight bastard, it's what he was shouting from the bottom of her heart, wanting to finally release all the pent-up resentment. Misery agreed. Well, yeah, he was a big troublemaker, so I feel more relieved than anything. RETURNP a GE79 321. Even Sauka, who was listening to that, is convinced that he must have been a dangerous person. From the sense of relief that the crisis had passed, everyone's tension was lessened. All right. I drew with Tensura, so in effect, it's no exaggeration to say that I defeated Twilight. I feel really refreshed, as if I have fulfilled one of my long-cherished wishes. Even though Rain hadn't done anything, she still interpreted it in a way that was convenient for her. However, the problem was not yet resolved. Velzard, her original objective still unknown but in effect, was still alive and well, and this land was still covered in a white, enclosed world. As if to remind them of this once again. Guy and Velzard's fierce battle began in earnest asterisk in the air. White and red haki aura intersected. The small mass was filled with a heat that would have been enough to engulf a star system. A mere collision would cause great destruction, but since the ground was protected, only ice and snow blew wildly. Guy's attacks did not work on Velzard, because he wasn't serious. Guy had grasped everything. Tensura's victory and the nonsense of those idiots. And even the changes in his enemy, Velzard. He sensed the presence of a third party along the way and was constantly on guard. It was difficult to find out while fighting Velzard, but Tensura had uncovered his true identity. Moreover, she had just defeated him with great care. Now he could finally focus on Velzard. Even so, Twilight, huh? That doesn't mean he died from that. He's probably still inside Velzard, Guy speculated. And he thought that Tensura had probably noticed that as well. Tensura was a fearsome person that even Guy acknowledged. She had shown an unparalleled power of evil that lived up to the name of the White Queen. According to conventional common sense, void could not be controlled. Once unleashed, all beings trapped within the range of effect of nihilistic world would be devoured. However, Tensura perfectly controlled it, destroying only Twilight. This was a surprising phenomenon even to Guy. And only Guy had noticed. What Tensura had done was a much more difficult and incredible technique. Tensura had taken her time to create a cage out of void. She sealed Twilight inside it, cutting off its connection to the outside. At the moment he was burned up by white flare, she observed the movements of the information particles and confirmed and grasped the main body inside Velzard. RETURNP a GE80 321. Because Guy had done the same thing, he correctly understood the meaning of Tensura's actions. What a horrible thing to do. I might have lost too if I had let my guard down. And he thought of something impossible. Guy would never let his guard down, so that was just a fantasy. Anyway, there was no doubt that he needed to reassess Tensura's threat level. But he could think about that later. Right now, stopping Velzard was the priority. Guy, you understand, don't you? Of course I do. Then that's good. I'm going to rest, so can I leave the rest to you? Yeah, You'll leave the void covering Velzard as it is, right? Haha, I guess there's no other way. I'll lend it to you. Tensura said that and descended to the ground. She would never admit it because she was so proud, but she was already so exhausted that she didn't even have the magic power left to float in the air. Guy saw through it, but he wasn't so gauche as to point it out. On the contrary, he even made an unreasonable request. Tensura was convinced that Twilight's main body was inside Velzard, so she had spread void over her body to cover it. This erased the information from the information particles and prevented Twilight's regeneration. Guy asked her to leave it as it was. In other words, he meant that he wanted her to keep the void maintained indefinitely. Tensura lightly agreed, saying it was a loan. But this exchange was only possible because of the firm trust they had in each other. Thus, there was no longer any fear of Twilight getting in the way. Guy grinned and faced Velzard. They had been fighting for dozens of hours, but neither of them was serious. However, this was where the real fight began. The preliminary skirmishes were sufficient, so Guy intended to launch an attack next that could be a fatal blow. RETURNP a GE81 321. Well, she won't die from this, right? Thinking this, he unleashed a hand chop. Naturally, Velzard parried it with a relaxed expression. TCH, you're going to nullify even my calamity claw. The blow that Guy claw contaminates the enemy's inner self by infiltrating infectious destructive particles from the point of contact. It has a greater effect on the mind than the body, and even a graze can cause mental contamination, making it a special attack against spiritual life forms that is extremely deadly. It was a technique that was effective enough even without a direct hit, making it a first-time killer. But even so, it didn't work on Velzard. Any material that Velzard touches is instantly fixed in place. Because it exerted influence at the information particle level, it froze everything, regardless of whether it was physical or mental. So Velzard smiled playfully. Of course not. Let's keep crossing blades, shall we? Hearing that, Guy felt slightly annoyed. This guy, in the voice of Nandor the Relentless, how long is she going to hold a grudge? She hasn't changed since they first met, Guy thought, and at the same time he realized a possibility. Could it be that Velzard has even frozen her emotions? If that were the case, it would be troublesome. It's because the harder and more rigid something is, the more fragile it is to unexpected shocks. Now that it was clear that Twilight resided in Velzard's mind, Guy realized that the situation was unpredictable. Velzard had originally approached Guy with the purpose of testing him. Out of jealousy for Guy, who was recognized by his elder brother Veldanava. And as the years passed, he began to feel, just a little, yes, just a little, that it was fun. In a way, that was only natural. RETURNP a GE82 321, because it was Velzard, not Feldway, who had managed to empty the Celestial Palace. Forever alone, without doubting the current situation, which was nothing more than a sense of duty. That's why life with Guy was refreshing. If she continued like this, she would forget her purpose. No, in reality, there was no need to worry. In her regular visits to Celestial Palace, Velzard took a fresh look at her own heart Kokoro. In order to never forget her original intentions, she made full use of her newly awakened King of Jealousy Leviathan and King of Patience Gabriel to freeze her own heart. In this way, Velzard sealed away his emotions as if to discard her wavering. And now, Velzard was in a trance. In this long-desired situation, his heart was filled with a sense of great happiness. Yes, Velzard had always wished for this. To defeat Guy, who has become serious, this time for sure. And prove that she was the strongest. If she did that, Guy would acknowledge her, or so Velzard thought. Why do I have to win against Guy? A question arose somewhere in her mind, but she ignored it. In order to prevent such questions from arising, she closed her heart more and more. While maintaining a smile on the surface, a fierce blizzard was constantly blowing inside Velzard. Now it's time to fulfill your long-cherished desire, Twilight, her ally, whispered to Velzard. He has completely informatized his own core of the heart Kokoro and turned it into the ability itself. Recently, new information and facts have come to light at a dizzying pace. Twilight, while letting out a happy shriek, seemed to be scrutinizing that information, and as a result, had undergone rapid evolution. Now, it seems that he has reached the level of being that transcends the spiritual life forms known as manas. The pseudo-dragon form is also one of them, and it was an unparalleled power. but it is originally demonstrated only when combined with Velzard. RETURNP a GE83 321. The best plan would have been to use my trump card, the pseudo-dragon body. After we'd reached a stalemate with Guy, it can't be helped. Guy never lets his guard down. He had been looking for an opening for several dozen hours, but there was not even a glimmer to be found. Guy never let his guard down from start to finish. On the contrary, he seemed certain that Velzard was hiding something, so Velzard thought that plan would fail. It was unexpected that Tensura would interfere, but the situation remained unchanged. Well, yeah. Even so, the White Queen Tensura is something else. She's become able to manipulate the extremely dangerous void as she pleases. That's right. It's still covering my body, so I can't even use the pseudo-dragon form. In truth, Velzard was wrapped in the shining white darkness. It's not that she can't shake it off, but it's dangerous to do it in front of Guy. Since the void has the property of absorbing energy, Velzard could erase it by releasing magic power. However, she didn't think that would be the end of it. If void was summoned again, it would be a complete waste. It is a really troublesome and difficult hand. Release-type attacks are completely useless, aren't they? It's not just that the power is reduced, but the moment you fire is completely obvious, so evasion becomes easy. As expected of Twilight, his analytical ability is top-notch. The pseudo-personality he sent out was completely defeated by Tensura, but it was extremely capable as an advisor. Tensura's goal was to contain Twilight. That meant she had lost one of her trump cards against Guy. At this point, she had no choice but to abandon her original plan and go for a head-on battle. As for me, it's a welcome situation. Didn't say anything back. If Velzard was aiming for a sure victory, that would be one thing, but her goal was different. Defeat Guy, and then you can do as you please. Yes, I will. Velzard's smile deepened dramatically. The next moment, Velzard released her desire. She was already struggling to hold back, but she still held on to that last line. But now, in order to get Guy, she had abandoned her reason. RETURNP a GE84 321 Guy. For me, you are everything. I've been watching you all the time. I've only been watching you. Even so, why won't you see me? Look at me. Only look at me. Notice me, senpai. That was Velzard's cry from the bottom of her heart. It was a selfish and self-centered, but above all else, it was a pure desire. Guy had been hovering in the air and keeping his distance from Velzard, but sensing the danger fear, he flew backwards. It was a close call. In the place where he was before, raging ice and snow were blowing wildly. With the speed of lightning, Velzard began her fierce attack. Velzard, who had abandoned his strategy, was a threat in the true sense of the word. Even among the strongest dragon kinds, Velzard was in a class of her own. Second only to the Star King dragon Veldanava, she possessed unfathomable power. The enormous magical power that was released turned into a raging wave, trying to blow away Tensura's void. This was not what Velzard had intended. It was merely a threatening act accompanied by her rising fighting spirit. Even so, it was extremely effective. Damn it, this is no joke. It's going to cost you, Guy, Tensura said bitterly as she tried to join Moss inside the barrier. Even so, he did not give up and manipulated the void, skillfully diverting Velzard's magic power. The skill of his technique was in the realm of art, and even Rain, who was always competing with her, admitted defeat early on, saying, "It's impossible." Even Guy admitted it. Thanks, Tensura. If even Twilight came out here, it would be troublesome, and Guy's victory would have become more distant. I'm glad Tensura came, Guy thought from the bottom of his heart. Even Tensura didn't have the luxury of facing her again. It worked because it was the first move, but if it was a second time, countermeasures would have been taken. Before that, the best thing to RETURNP a GE85 321 do is to ignore enemies who revive no matter how many times they are defeated. That was one of the lessons she learned from her special training in Ramorous Labyrinth. Anyone who tried to stop Velzard now would be defeated in an instant. Not even Tensura could do it. It wasn't something that could be achieved by tactics, and dialogue would not work either. It was hopeless. There were fewer people who could face Velzard at this point than could be counted on one hand. No, even worse than that, even Veldora-sama or Velgrin-sama might not be able to do it. Only ones who could face her were those of the same rank as Dragonkind or Guy. Rimuru-sama could probably do something about it, but I'm pathetic for even thinking something like that. Tensura restrained herself, but no one could blame her. Rimuru wasn't here, so either way they had to do something on their own. There's no choice but to leave it to Guy. All remaining hope was placed on Guy, who had the potential to stop Velzard. Testarossa finally reached Moss's barrier. The inside was comfortable in anticipation of Testarossa joining them. This was because Moss, taking this opportunity to score points, had adjusted the temperature. It was as warm as the spring sunshine, and Sauka, who had been freezing, was able to take a breather. Not only that, Moss had even created a chair with material creation. There was no way she could sit on the frozen ground. Moss and the others had been standing the whole time, but there was no way Testarossa could be allowed to do such a thing. Only acting after being ordered was second-rate. First-rate was preparing everything in advance so as not to upset the master. Moss faithfully adhered to that theory while serving Testarossa. "Moss-kun, why didn't you make it this way from the beginning?" Rain complained as she sat down in a chair. The emphasis on kun was quite sarcastic. Rain was sensitive to the cold, so he had been enduring it up until now. She had the common sense to think that it was meaningless to wish for something they didn't have, so she had been quiet. RETURNP a GE 86 321 however. Seeing that chairs were prepared for Mizari, Rain, and even Sauka, it was clear that he had spare energy. Rain wanted to say, "Do it from the beginning if you can." She wanted to ask why only Testarossa was treated preferentially. "What are you talking about, Rain?" Testarossa, who had elegantly settled into the prepared chair, asked in exasperation. It was Mizari who answered. "I'm sorry, Testarossa. Rain is also working hard, so she seems to be a bit stressed." "Mizari, aren't you spoiling her too much?" "That's not true." Telling a child who is working hard to do their best will only push them into a corner, which is counterproductive, but encouraging a child who isn't working hard just isn't right. "Boy ain't right, I tell you. What are you trying to say?" Testarossa was genuinely astonished at Mizari's apparent lack of understanding. "Rain is working hard." "Are you serious?" "Of course I am." "Haven't you been looked down on by Guy?" "That's true, but that's because my skills aren't good enough, right?" "No," Testarossa thought, but she hesitated to say it aloud. She felt a little sorry for Mizari. The conversation stopped, and inside the barrier went quiet. Outside, the battle between Guy and Velzard was intensifying, so if there wasn't any topic of conversation, only the tension would increase. Even so, it was best to avoid careless topics. Still, it was safer to avoid careless topics. RETURNP a GE 87 321. By the way, Moss had erased his presence like air. He sat down, hiding behind Sauka, and silently did his job with a face that said it was none of his business. It was extremely stressful for him to have his name mentioned in a conversation between two primordials. It would be best to ignore it while hopping that topic of discussion would not touch him. However, Moss's wish was not heard. Look at Moss. Thanks to me, he's grown into a reasonably capable person, hasn't he? Please have mercy on me, Moss thought. If I were to fail, you would get so angry that you would erase me from existence. This is not a cutesy matter of provoking someone. The reality is that only those who can endure the pressure of not allowing failure are able to survive. Even if you tell me that it's your own achievement, well, it would be easier if I could say that, but Moss kept his mouth shut like a clam and showed his attitude that it's as Testarossa-sama says. Well, that's true. Looking at Moss, I can admit that you're competent in terms of education. But Rain can do it if she tries, right? She was made to cry, but you drew with her, didn't you? When was that? Testarossa looked dubious. It wasn't Mizari who answered, but Rain, who had been the subject of the conversation. Old stories are no longer relevant, are they? Rather than that, it's more important now to think about how to ensure Gai-sama's victory, isn't it? Her true intention of wanting to dodge the inconvenient story could be seen through. Changing the topic so blatantly is a surprisingly underhanded tactic. Sauka muttered quietly. She said that at Moss. Please keep quiet. At the very least, stop dragging me into this. Moss looked off into the distance, feeling like crying. Rain was trembling. Why is that? I feel like my position has become very precarious. RETURNP a GE 88 321, it's her own fault. However, Rain is the type of person who looks for the cause in others, so she doesn't think that she was in the wrong. This time as well, as soon as she understood that her cover-up wouldn't work, she decided to take the next step. In other words, she changed the topic again. Rain declared with a sense of satisfaction. There's no other choice. For the sake of victory, I'll go and help Guy-sama. How about that, Rain said, as if to show off. Hearing this, Tensura snorted. And then I won't stop you if you want to die. You'll just be defeated in an instant and provide us with some laughter. And so, as if putting into practice the words she had spoken earlier, she provoked Rain with her harsh words. Sauka is refraining from speaking as if to say, I have no right to speak. But she agrees with Tensura. The same goes for Moss. It's not just that his lord says so. It's obvious from considering the situation that Rain's words are laughable. Rain was one of the strongest, but she was at a great disadvantage against the top. Anyone would understand that Tensura's opinion was correct. Even Mizari, as expected, couldn't shield Rain. Well, that's true. Even if you go, you'll only get in Guy-sama's way, and we should do our best in what we can do, right? She said this to calm Rain down, and then skillfully changed the topic, saying, Now that you mention it, I sent my subordinates to Lubelius as well. Rain, who was left hanging, became teary-eyed, but she quickly changed her mood by saying, Thinking about it, it's cold outside, isn't it? One of Rain's strengths is her ability to recover quickly. I asked Velgrin-sama to take Rain's subordinates to Lubelius. It's tough here, but we need them to work hard there too. That's right. Even if we bring Velzard-sama back to his senses, it will be meaningless if the world is destroyed. In that regard, let's expect Luminous-sama, who is already there, to do something. RETURNP a GE89 321, and so the topic shifted. So, were you able to find Karara and the others? Tensura asked Moss. It was in the form of a question, but the only answer she's looking for is affirmation. Moss understood that, so she nodded without hesitation. Oh yes, that's good. They're under this snow, are they? That's right. Moss answered without hesitation. While searching for traces, he gradually moved and reached right above the ice statues of Karara and the others. Velzard's ice and snow had piled up several meters, so the ice sculpture was not visible. But without a doubt, there was a reaction from Karara and the others directly below the point where the barrier was set up. Milim's subordinates were also reacting, huddled a short distance away. There were no signs of life, but he was not worried about this. Since they were frozen in an instant by Velzard-sama's authority, it would be easy to revive them. Resurrection is impossible if the soul disappears, but there was no need to worry about that. So Moss himself wasn't concerned about that point. Tensura was the same. Anyway, the fighting force that would be useful in this place was only Karara and Obra. There were strong people such as Karian, Frey, and Midray who are awakened, Million class. Although they are slightly inferior to them, Esprit and the three beast warriors are also rare fighting forces. But they are no match for Guy and Velzard. It would be safer to postpone the rescue. Nevertheless, Tensura wanted to revive Karara in place of her own exhaustion. It would be even better if Obra could be revived at the same time. The outcome of the battle in the White World is still too uncertain. That is why it is important to secure as many fighting forces as possible. Them out as soon as possible. As you wish. RETURNP a GE90 321 Moss wanted to argue. That's unreasonable. But he was only allowed to agree, while lamenting that he couldn't even move them anyway, but he followed Tensura's orders and began the most appropriate action. Guy, who had been pondering after hearing Velzard's scream, had a thought. Velzard, I see, I didn't realize. You've been harboring jealousy towards me all this time. Velzard reacted softly to Guy's muttering. She smiled. However, that didn't mean that her rampage would stop. Guy, I've always, and so the world was dyed white. Unlike Tensura's nihilistic world, this white was a pure, transparent, isolated, absolute stop. World, eternal world. By the will of the authority, all laws were forcibly stopped from functioning. While only time flowed slowly, Guy was in a state of slight bewilderment and deep understanding. So that's it. No wonder the sprouting of jealousy was slow. He understood. At this point, Guy realized the hidden power Velzard possessed. However, the extent of its effect remained unknown. It was a contradictory power. Controlling it would be difficult with a half-hearted mental strength. It was only possible because it was Velzard. And when she made Guy aware of it, it was safe to assume that Velzard had seen through Guy's hand. Now, what to do? Guy pondered again. Unlike the rather carefree barrier, Guy, who is the person involved, was very serious. In the end, it boils down to one point: how to stop Velzard's rampage. There was also the issue of how to prevent Ivregay's attack, but he didn't have the time to worry about that. RETURNP a GE91 321. Those who chase two hares will catch neither, as the saying goes. But Guy correctly grasps his own abilities, so he only acts according to policies that can produce steady results. It would be easy if Velzard was being controlled, but that is not the case. She is challenging Guy of her own will. So Guy had no choice but to put up with her until Velzard was satisfied. TCH, that's what's troublesome. I have no choice but to do it, defeat Velzard. I could only think about what to do after that after I won. That being said, it was an extremely difficult situation. Once again, an absolute freezing wave of ridiculous power grazed Guy's cheek. If it had hit him directly, it would have penetrated numerous defensive measures and barriers and caused a fatal injury. As proof of that, he sensed the distant mountains collapsing. It was probably because the molecular bonds were broken by the direct hit on the bedrock in the middle of the mountain, and it could no longer withstand its own weight. It was an unreasonable level of violence. Those dragon-type guys are so selfish and troublesome. They exert their power as they please without thinking about reducing damage to the surroundings. Such races are basically troublesome because they are suited to combat. In fact, Guy used to have a similar personality, but now he made a promise to Veldanava. Though he lived as he pleased, he had begun to pay attention to his surroundings. He comprehends that this had placed him at a disadvantage. Guy looked at Velzard. Her icy white hair and golden eyes were beautiful. She was a terrifyingly beautiful woman, but her danger level seemed to be proportional to her beauty. Facing Velzard, who boasted endless and overwhelming magical power, Guy decided that he could not afford to hold back his trump card. My goodness, you've driven me this far. Guy being cornered was something that hadn't happened since he fought Velzard in El Dorado or when he fought Rudra in the past. However, that did not mean he had been defeated. It was just that it was very rare for him to get serious. In fact, Guy's power, the ultimate skill, King of Pride Lucifer, is the strongest ability precisely because Guy wields it. The abilities of this skill, King of Pride Lucifer, are diverse, but its essence is the complete reproduction of abilities once seen. This is one of the reasons why Guy waited for other demon lords to develop ultimate abilities, ultimate skills. To become the strongest being, all one needs to do is observe various ultimate abilities. Ultimate RETURNP a GE92 321 skills, and incorporate them into oneself. With this in mind, Guy has learned the powers of many strong people. As a result, he has become able to deal with all kinds of situations. Naturally, this was also reflected in combat. With Lucifer, Guy was able to imitate the pseudo-dragon form that Twilight had shown him, and even the nihilistic world that Tensura had likely wanted to keep secret. This is why Guy is the most terrifying. Since he can even make the enemy's abilities his own, Guy will never lose in terms of the number of moves. This is no exception even if the opponent is Velzard, but this time there were problems. From Guy's point of view, he wants to analyze Velzard's abilities and make them his own. If he does that, it will be easy to neutralize them, so he will surely win and subdue Velzard. But in order to do that, he had to make the target use their power. TCH, until the crucial moment, she won't use it in front of me, will she? Velzard is aware that Guy can imitate other people's abilities. If that is the case, she should not expose her trump card abilities. That's why she was only using King of Patience Gabriel right now. Guy already knew about Velzard's King of Patience Gabriel. As such, he was able to deal with the previous battle with minimal effort, and he had predicted all dangerous attacks in advance and avoided them perfectly. However, it is meaningless to just grasp the abilities. Velzard's power is dangerous regardless of her abilities, and if he showed even a slight opening due to the difference in the amount of magic essence energy, he could receive a fatal blow at any moment. When Velzard will show her abilities to Guy would be the decisive moment. Whether Guy's analysis can keep up in that instant will surely be the turning point of the battle. Knowing this, Guy was depressed. A battle is something that must be won with certainty, and an unpredictable situation was out of the question, especially a gamble like a strategy. Guy felt like his pride had been trampled on. But even so, Guy believed in his own strength. Well, there's no way I'm going to lose. RETURNP a GE93 321, no matter how cornered he was, Guy's core heart would never break. Full of confidence as an absolute strong man, Guy chuckled softly. Asterisk after a tense moment, Guy escaped Velzard's absolute stop. If he hadn't understood that power, his defeat would have been decided the moment his movements were stopped. It's an overwhelmingly unreasonable ability that forcibly stops the kinetic energy of all kinds of matter through its interaction. It was so reckless that he was able to repel it with the force of his will. It was a rough technique that only Guy could do, but it wasn't a problem since he wasn't that exhausted. Besides, that time was valuable. By constantly observing Velzard, Guy had gained one conviction. There was no doubt that Velzard was acting from her heart, but it was also likely that she was being tempted by someone. That someone was, needless to say, Twilight, who resided within Velzard. Velzard herself seemed to think that she was acting of her own will. However, it seemed that this was the result of being cleverly led. That bastard is probably watching a serious battle between me and Velzard, and he's planning to use it for his own research, isn't he? Velzard is not stupid, but she is single-minded. For the clever Twilight, deceiving her must have been as easy as taking candy from a baby. What's troublesome is that this is unrelated to the influence of abilities or anything like that. Unless Velzard's heart is moved, Guy's words won't reach her. That's very troublesome, and it will be a gamble with few chances of success even for Guy. That's why he couldn't make a decision and continued to observe the situation. Soon, he would have to make it though. He couldn't leave Velzard alone any longer, and more than anything, he had a bad feeling about this. Twilight is the worst kind of troublemaker in history. He uses all sorts of schemes, and whether they succeed or fail, he's a great villain who spreads malice throughout the world. In the past, he surprisingly had a likable side, but from a certain day onwards, he changed completely and began repeating inhumane experiments. Didn't that bastard Dagrul also complain? In the end, he never told me what happened. Well, it has nothing to do with me anyway. Even if something happened to an old acquaintance, as long as he laid a hand on what's important to Guy, he was an enemy. RETURNP, a GE94 321, Guy's anger quietly grew. That became fuel and burned Guy's core of the heart Kokoro hot. That's ridiculous. Immortality. A power that can't be realized without relying on others is something that doesn't suit him. Twilight should be free to pursue her own desires. However, it's extremely unpleasant when his own people, his partner, is used for that. Whether Velzard had been deceived was just Guy's speculation. However, he was angrier than ever, so the truth didn't matter. Guy unleashed the elemental magic heat dragon flame blast napalm burst on Velzard. The scorching dragon, twisting its long body, danced wildly around her. It's a magic that burns the target just by touching it, but it was expected that it wouldn't work on Velzard. From the beginning, Guy used this for the purpose of restraint. However, this was also in vain. It was scattered by the beautiful fine ice diamond dust that arose as Velzard breathed and bloomed into a large ring of fire in the air before disappearing. It was freezing breath, an absolute freezing wave released in dragon form, but Velzard was able to use it in human form as well. As expected, Guy thought to himself. At the same time, he was also impressed. She's strong, isn't she? Guy smiled gleefully. As Guy had acknowledged, Velzard was an incredibly strong person. Her strength had not weakened since they met. On the contrary, she kept on a comparable level to Guy, whose strength had continued to grow. Guy was very satisfied that she was worthy of being his partner. It was a worry to have to do something about such an opponent, but it only made him more motivated. The saying goes that those without emotions or will are weak. The reason why Twilight lost to Tensura was probably because he abandoned those emotions. If you kill your emotions, you'll be left behind by change. Therefore, those without wills do not grow. In that respect, Velzard was different. If Velzard had only been manipulated by others and gone berserk, she wouldn't have been able to reach this level of strength. It's precisely because she is saturated with a single, specialized jealousy that she has become so strong to the ultimate degree. RETURNP, a GE95 321. Is she being used by Twilight while using it as a stepping stone to fuel herself? Well, either way, that bastard Twilight needs to be dealt with. Regardless of whether Velzard returns to her senses or not, Guy intends to deal with Twilight. Good grief. It seems that I, of all people, have been overthinking things. If you think about things simply, you'll see the answer. Guy threw away all his distracting thoughts and focused only on the problem at hand. If Velzard is selfish, then Guy is the embodiment of arrogance. He doesn't consider the other person's circumstances and just acts as he pleases, with the mentality of crushing them because he doesn't like them. Once he remembered that that was himself, the rest was easy. He just explodes his pent-up anger and rampages as his heart dictates. At this point, Guy finally got serious. He stopped saving his energy for the world-destruction dragon Ivrige and faced Velzard with all his heart and soul. He's finally gotten serious, Velzard rejoiced. Now finally she can enjoy fighting in a world with just Guy. A smile naturally blossomed on her face at the thought. Even so, Guy is really strong. The battle had begun and the day had already passed. Although neither of them was at full strength, it was a battle in a realm that ordinary demon lords could not even enter. Guy showed no weaknesses. As if he could see through their plans, he acted like a role model. In addition, Guy was using magicules from the atmosphere to cast magic, just like humans do. In other words, he was fighting using Velzard's magic power and energy, so he wasn't wasting any of it. Normally, this is an inefficient way to activate magic, but when Guy does it, it's a different story. He can convert magic essence into magic instantly without even generating a slight time delay. Guy is strong. RETURNP a GE96, 321, he is the strongest among the primordials. And even if Velzard were to try and defeat him seriously, it's unclear whether she would be able to win. Having always been by Guy's side, Velzard knows the reason why he is the strongest. With his genius observation skills, Guy is able to understand the true nature of an ability or skill just by seeing a glimpse of it. Therefore, all of Velzard's tricks were practically exposed. If she had only possessed ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of Patience, Gabriel, her chances of victory would have been close to zero. That's why Velzard had been preparing her secret weapon for this day. The trump card called Twilight was sealed by Testeros's intervention. All that remained was her trump card, Envious King Leviathan. But it seemed Guy had found out about this as well. He's really not letting his guard down, Velzard thought, feeling angry but also pleased at the same time. And that's exactly why Guy, the only one she recognized, made her proud. However, she couldn't just be happy. Velzard, who has more than twice the amount of Guy's magicule's energy, has only one trump card left. There is only one chance to win. Right now, she was circulating her magic essence in Frozen World, Eternal World, so it wasn't being consumed at all. However, since Guy was getting serious, she should have considered that her advantage was lost. Nevertheless, impatience is forbidden. If she revealed her hand poorly, her chances of victory would be crushed. As before, she had to drive Guy into a corner with King of Patience Gabriel, then aim for a sure kill and attack with King of Jealousy Leviathan. That's why I should have prepared more trump cards before facing Guy. It was also unexpected that Twilight's dragon body didn't even serve as a diversion. Luck doesn't seem to be on Velzard's side, but she accepted it as fate. Since Guy is serious, her goal is as good as accomplished. Velzard flies towards Guy with all his feelings, and so Guy and Velzard, those who are at the pinnacle of the world, have finally become serious.